On a dark, storm-choked night, thunder roared right beside a luxurious castle, and under the flash of lightning, a man in a raincoat was battling a girl right in the rain. He couldn't shake the feeling it was wildly strange, her sword still hadn't shattered, and that realization slammed into him as he clenched up, knowing this was his deadliest strike. Then he snapped back, spun toward the girl, and yep, she was the Demon King. Even though it was late, he said he had to ask her something, and she laughed it off like it was no big deal. Good, she said, I've got a question too. So they both demanded answers, who forged their swords because they looked way too similar. They went dead quiet and the Demon King lined in, asking whether this was really the strange blacksmith's mark. Then the guy admitted he figured it was that old man instead. He explained that he finally got what was going on, and now they were matched since their swords were equally deadly. She let out a heavy sigh and snapped that fighting on was pointless. Then the Demon King declared that if that's how it has to be, he swears their generation won't ever wage war against each other. He leaned in and asked her if it was okay to tell the blacksmith about it, and the girl waved it off without a second thought, because if he's truly unhappy with them, that alone could scare off the war. The girl let out a heavy sigh, sure the guy had seen this coming all along. He basically admitted it, then cut the moment short and said goodbye. As they walked away, they both realized the blacksmith had played them together. Back at the blacksmith shop, the man was hammering away when someone suddenly burst in and said the work was finished. He asked the owner if he could swing by later to inspect everything, nodded in agreement, and went right back to his forge. Two girls chatted in sweet tones while he just watched, smiling like it meant everything. Then he snapped his gaze to the sky, stunned by how long it had been since he first started living in this world. The day he died, he sprinted under the truck to snatch a little cat from death, but fate wouldn't let him get out. He only dove in because he was a cat lover. Then, right as he drifted toward oblivion, someone snapped, "Hey, are you awake?" People said at least his soul didn't get wrecked. Then the man snapped, "What's happening?" And someone warned, if we keep talking, he'll die in that world. He got the whole picture, but that bone-deep cold still didn't make sense to him. Usually when a creature dies, its soul breaks down and becomes fresh resources. But the stranger kept stalling the process, forcing his mind to stay sharp just to stop himself from shattering under the overload. He demanded to know if the man had saved the cat before he died, and the confused guy nodded along, stunned but agreeing. She grinned and told him, "Yep, that's me," and the man nearly choked on his surprise. Then she leaned in and said she's been watching the worlds. She hops through parallel ones, hunting for anything that could poison other worlds from the shadows. She saw their whole world through a cat's eyes, then she messed up hard, nearly got herself killed, but that man lunged in and saved her. The man fumed, "If you're really omnipotent, how in the world did you die when a truck hit you?" And she replied, "Easy, only this temporary body gets crushed, the rest of me would keep going, living on like any ordinary cat." And if that hadn't happened, her soul would have kept on burning, alive and unbroken, while the man shouldn't have died in that world at all, yet suddenly a hole opened. And to make up for his death, the girl vowed to build a brand new creature, while the man admitted he didn't fully get how any of it worked, but still wondered if there was some way it could bring him back and keep him from dying in that accident. She swore this was the easiest way to fix everything, then reminded him, cold as ice, that she'd already seen him die. She realizes what she sees gets sent and locked into the world, then she drops the apology and tells him his death is already recorded just like that. The man stares back in disbelief, shouting, "So what am I supposed to do now?" What? The girl admitted she hadn't saved it in other worlds yet, then grinned and said she'd move it somewhere new, because she wanted to forge a substitute for existence, and he finally understood every last bit, didn't he? He shot back with a wary question, why was she putting him through all this? The girl only shrugged and said it was because he died due to her inattention. It made her feel uneasy. Then the man let out a heavy sigh and said he understood everything, and she quickly added that, as a thank you, she wanted to hand him a little advantage in this new world. She fired the question at him, what kind of life did he want to live? He stared off, thinking it through, because he was a lonely soul with nobody waiting at home. He coded his life away at a ruthless black company, and by the time he snapped back to reality, gray hair had swallowed his whole body, an old man trapped in the ruin, knowing the only one who'd mourn his death was his boss, who would just hire someone new and move on. In that world, there's nothing he'll ever have to lose, and not a soul will be bored of him. He's staring at the idea of a second chance at life, like it might be waiting just around the corner. He told her he loves making things and wants to turn it into real income, and she lit up and said she could do it. He also confessed that he loves cats so deeply he'd even risk everything for them, and all he wants is a peaceful life, just him and his cat, so the girl leaned in and asked what he actually wanted to create. He told me he'd always been hooked on blacksmithing, but life never gave him the chance to actually roll up his sleeves and try it himself. She nodded and said she'd push the physical look first, then funnel what was left into language, production, and a touch of magic, right before she snapped her fingers and blazed a bright flash. The man shut his eyes as the girl beamed and thanked him. Then he stretched out his hand, and reality started to melt away. In the next instant, like a splash of water or a beam of light, everything vanished and he stumbled into the forest. The man snapped his eyes open to a forest floor of grass under him, and when he pushed himself up, a sharp, thin pain stabbed his body. Then a brutal headache crashed over him like a wave. Suddenly something wild hit him. Information slammed from his head straight down to his fingertips, flooding him with knowledge he'd never even dreamed of before. Then it all crashed into his mind and body, hit him so hard he finally understood why his head was pounding, his whole life as he knew it was done, and the man let out a sharp gasp. He yanked his hands away from his head and blurted that it felt way easier, then stretched his arms, stared at himself, and whoa, something new seemed to course through his body, like fresh memories and skills had just been poured in. He spun around, asking if this was really his place, and then he froze in shock. He stood beside a tidy wooden house, shoved the door open, and stepped in like he was chasing the girl's clues. Then he stared straight into the place. The place was packed with furniture, just a plain room, a working kitchen, and stacks of ingredients, and when he finally took it all in, he realized it was everything you needed to live, and for the first time he had enough. He also clocked something terrifying: no electricity, no running water, and not a single sign of a well, so you'd better hunt for water somewhere else. Then he pointed out there's another room too. He snapped the lid open and froze in shock. This was his workshop, packed with everything he needed, materials and tools. Then he lifted the hammer and his eyes lit up. He already knew how to use them and exactly what to do, all locked tight in his head, and then he turned to the girl and thanked her for that knowledge. He called it priority mode, then his stomach growled like a warning, and since it was already noon, he decided it was time to cook lunch. Once he finished eating, he set off to explore the area and hunt down a water source. He cooked up dried meat and root veggies right in the kitchen, living the life of a bachelor who knew his way around simple food. Then everything got sliced up and fried. He stared at his own hand, snapped for fire, and then froze, shocked that it actually worked. It's tiny, so he can't hold it long or crank it up to scorching heat, but hey, it'll still do the job as a lighter. Dinner tasted like nothing bad, but not a disaster, so the man braced himself, hunting for any source of water, then grabbed his tools and gathered his hair. Right outside, he started scanning the area and carving marks into the trees. Then a green squirrel darted into view, and the instant he saw it, he knew this wasn't Earth anymore. He couldn't stop asking what kind of forest this was, how massive it really got, and whether towns or villages hid nearby. He had zero clue what materials the locals even used. Farmers busted their backs to make things work, and the man didn't realize it. He already knew the same thing as all the other skills he had. Then, out of nowhere, he let out a heavy sigh, spotted a bunch of herbs, and figured they must be medicinal. He thought it meant that it was part of the knowledge he'd collected, but man, knowing something he didn't truly know still feels weird, so he just took some. His body and mind slowly started clicking with the world, and when he finally stepped into open space, he couldn't believe what he saw. There was a lake nearby, a solid 15-minute walk from the house, and it felt like the perfect workout, cool, fresh water too, and when he looked in, he saw himself, younger, just like he asked for, and then his whole body suddenly felt light as air. He looked around like he was around 30, and yeah, fish were right there, so food was waiting. Then he heard a strange sound, froze, and scanned the ground to see what might be lying there. He prayed it wasn't a bear, please, not something wild. Then the man rounded the corner and found a girl lying there, knocked out cold. He reached out, checked on her, and asked if she was okay. Then his face went paper white in an instant. The guy stared and realized she had ears and a tail, like a real tiger, and that's when he couldn't stop wondering who she was. He knew she wouldn't make it if he didn't move right now, so he hoisted the girl onto his shoulders and sprinted away. The girl gasped as pain slammed into her, and the man rushed in, saying he knew it was brutal, but she had to keep going. He even insisted it was way lighter than it looks, then he shoved it right up at the house entrance. He snapped up the sewing tools in a flash. Now all that was left was the fabric, and when he found it, he tore the canvas apart to turn it into bandages. Next, he boiled the needle to sterilize it. Then he grabbed the girl, apologized, and made it right. He tore off her clothes to inspect the damage, and as panic clenched his chest, he realized the worst wound was right on his stomach. With priority mode at his fingertips, he knew exactly what to do. Then he gulped in shock because the water was scalding hot. He had to stitch up that wound with a sterilized needle and thread, and the man jerked as the girl's breath caught pain sharp enough to make her gasp. Then he blurted out an apology, swearing it would all be over soon. After a while he dressed her, then spoon-fed her soup, and he finally saw her condition hold steady, so he could jump in with first aid, even if he's a total beginner. And if a scar sticks around, all he'll be able to do is apologize. He let out a heavy sigh, relieved that the herbia gathered earlier had done its job, cleaning and easing the pain, and just as that thought landed, the girl's ears snapped upright. He let out a tired sigh, realizing he'd only just caught his breath, because now he'd finally get to live in this world. First things first, he had to gear up for the life of a blacksmith, and there was no shortage of work to do. With a second chance burning in his chest, he refused to waste it as a non-stop workaholic. He wanted to grab everything he could and live comfortably. He weighed the idea of starting work tomorrow, but for now he kept checking on the girls whenever he could, because if he fell asleep, things could go bad fast. After a while, he nodded off right there beside the girl's bed, and just when peace finally settled in, a brutal scream shattered the silence. He jerked awake as the girl lifted his head with her paw. Tucking herself under a blanket, she kept that man miles away, because that night marked the start of his brand new life. He stared at her hands like they might bite, realizing she wasn't squeezing for real, so she wasn't trying to kill him. He stared at her stomach like he couldn't ignore it anymore, then blurted, asking if her wound was okay. She looked shocked, but she said nothing. After that, she admitted it still hurts, but it's finally healing, and the man let out a breath of relief. She stared at him and asked straight out if he had seen her. He insisted he had to do it to treat the wound the right way, but swore he didn't lay a hand on anyone else. She pressed him for proof, and he swore on his life that it was true. She said nothing, then yanked her hand back, cold as ice, and told him, "I'll trust you for now." He sprang to his feet and shot her a grateful thank you. The girl smirked and said, "You don't smell like a monster or anything." The man demanded what it meant, and she admitted her heart was pounding. He let out a relieved sigh, thank goodness she wasn't embarrassed, then grabbed her clothes and ordered her to put them on. The man snapped that her old clothes were soaked in blood, and he couldn't do anything unless he tore them off to help. She nodded and understood. He threw out an apology, insisting he had no clue those things mattered to her at all. "That's not how it is," she shot back, "just old rags, that's all." Then she hurried into getting dressed. The girl leaned in and asked, "Is this really your house?" The man nodded and confirmed it. She admitted the place was pretty awesome. Then she shot him another question, "So what are you doing here?" She has zero memory of living out here in this forest, yet the man insists he showed up here yesterday. She said she rarely comes to this stretch of the Black Forest, like she might have just slipped past it without noticing. The Black Forest. She had a few facts about him, and this spot sat east of the forest. She normally headed north or west, but yesterday she finally paused to rest, and a giant bear charged in, and that's when the man already knew. She's convinced that if that man hadn't found her, the bear would have mauled her into scraps, and the scary part is, he didn't even realize how dangerous it was. She thought for a second, then said, "Look, us beastmen usually have bodies built like steel compared to humans, but with an injury like this, you won't be able to hunt or roam the forest for about 2 whole weeks." So the man leaned in and asked if then she wanted to stay with him for a while. She blinked in surprise, then he told her he'd just moved in and needed an assistant to help with the housework, and the blacksmithing too. So he'll hook her up with a place to stay and full meals until she's back on her feet. Honestly, not a bad deal, and the girl stared in shock, totally blown away. She was so lost in thought she couldn't even find an answer, and when he saw it, nerves hit him hard, because the story in her eyes was twitching with something real. She told them, "As long as it smells suspicious, I'll stay here until my injury heals and I can move normally, then I'll deal with it." He said, "Don't worry about any of that right now." She grinned and promised she'd stay under his care for now, and then the man smiled back. Right out of nowhere he snapped, "What's your name?" And she answered in a quiet voice, "Samya." He lit up and said, "That's such a cool name," but she frowned and admitted she didn't like it. She wanted something cooler. He asked if she wanted to go by a name like Gonzalez, and then Samya burst into laughter, turning the tables to ask what kind of name that even was. Her laughter crushed him with embarrassment, and his cheeks burned red. Then he swallowed hard and said, "Even so, her family gave her that name, and it fits her perfectly." Then the girl's cheeks flared red, and she blurted out her thanks. Right after, she leaned in and asked his name, and he answered, "Azo Tanuya." At least that's what everyone called him. Yeah, his northern first name shocked her, and she'd noticed it didn't stop there. He even had a surname. In this world, people like him seemed to live up north. The girl swallowed hard and apologized. Samya blurted out that she didn't mean to offend him. She just barely ever saw last names around here. He shrugged it off and told her not to worry. Men with big surnames usually roll with status and live on some grand estate, so it's wildly strange that Ivy Jozo has nothing but a forge. Sammy thought everything would be fine if she just took it that way. Then he realized he'd been the one struggling. The man told her it would mean a lot if she used his first name. Simia nodded on the spot, and he lit up, thanking her right away. He chucked coal into the furnace and told everyone it would be plenty for what they needed. Then ISO decided to kick things off with a small knife. First, he cranks the oven to life with a flick of magic. Then he has to hold the heat steady until the coals finally catch and blaze. Then comes the magic of the wind, because wind magic pumps in oxygen, like bellows feeding a forge, so with the flames still not too wild, he can take it on himself. But the moment Ezo crawled into bed, it was way hotter than he'd expected, because once the temperature hits 800 degrees, the steel's color flips, and that's when he finally gets to start forging. He figured it out on the fly, like he'd done it 100 times, even though it was his first try. Thanks to its preferential mode, it flashes a heads up the moment the hardware is ready. The instant the signal hit, he knew the moment was here. He lifted his hammer. Right after that, he slammed into the object fast. Izo stared in disbelief, like, "You did that yourself." The impact was so brutal it felt almost unreal. Yesterday when he hauled Samia home, and earlier when he carried water, I watched it like a miracle. Even at 30, he wasn't that strong, but now that man is clearly built different and stronger than ever. Then he scrubbed the blade clean with a file, polished it up, and finished by grinding it sharp on the stone, so slick and smart you could swear he'd done it 100 times. He took the knowledge and skills he'd been given, then sharpened them into real experience, turning his body into a master S, with every deadly edge of the blade reflecting it. He gripped a razor-sharp knife he'd forged himself, his very first creation, and Anzo didn't even know what to slice with it, so he grabbed the root vegetables and went straight to cutting. He slammed the force into it and sliced the board right out from under the root vegetables. Then he just stared, baffled at what he'd unleashed and what kind of insane mess he'd accidentally made. None of the knives in that house bit cleanly. They were dull as ever, and he swore it was because someone was getting the good stuff instead. He didn't need just any blade, he needed one that sliced like magic. And yeah, he knew it was way too dangerous to mess around with. Iso wondered if he could grab the knife to defend himself, then snapped into action, shaping a pen fast and deciding exactly what he had to show Samian. He figured if he used the preferential mode skills, the blades would slice so perfectly that he'd never be able to pass that terrifying knife off on the market. He was already planning to forge 3 more knife types tomorrow, one razor-sharp, one a notch duller, and the last barely sharper than this. He wanted to show it to Samia first, then figure out what to do with it after, so he yanked her awake since dinner was ready, but she refused to get up, not even a little. Samia snapped that even after hours of sleep, it still never felt like enough. Ezo asked how she was really doing, and she admitted that to bring her blood level back up, she'd have to get moving a lot, so she sat there thinking hard. Samia stared at the lamp and blurted, "Is this magic?" She didn't buy that Iso could pull off magic at all. Then Iso shrugged and said it was just a simple one, and Samia couldn't help but admire those people with that surname. The man insisted sleep matters, but nutrition hits just as hard too, so for lunch he served up fried meat and veggies, and since ISO doesn't exactly cook for fun, that was the best he could pull off, while the girl kept chattering through the whole meal. In this world, ISO is still scraping together money just to buy groceries, firewood, and kitchen supplies, and ISO tells Samia, "Don't be shy, pick the bed you want." The very next day he checked, those knives were already set and waiting, and Izo rushed to call Samia to help him out. She stepped in but admitted she barely knew the first thing about blacksmithing. Still, he insisted she try out those knives. He shoved one into her hands and ordered her to begin, so she nodded and said, "That's all, then we're fine." And right away they dove into the dumbest one. She slammed her hand down and sliced through the root vegetable in a flash, and the girl couldn't believe her eyes. She stared at the blade like it was pure magic, praising how insanely skilled Izo was, and he shot back a quick thanks before asking her to test the next knife, so she snatched it up and pressed it into place. He chopped the root vegetable even faster, and ISO noticed that this way is way easier. Meanwhile, the girl stared in total shock. Samia snapped, "What is this?" because he was cutting like a pro, so he told her to try the last one, and this was the whole setup. She grabbed a knife, planted it to the root vegetable, and got ready to cut. With a quick tap, she sliced through the board under the root crop, shocked by what she'd just done. Then the man urged her to try prying him out, so she lifted the whole thing with careful hands. The girl blurted in panic, "What is it?" while Ezo snapped, "Calm down, don't hold a knife like that, it's dangerous." She nodded, swallowing her apology, and he waved it off like it was nothing, saying he hadn't warned her earlier and that everything was fine. Her reaction confirmed he'd been right all along. That priority mode he got lets him tap into a top-tier blacksmith's power, but if he wants to sell what he makes, he'd better figure out how to use it smart. Samia asked the guy if she could buy it since it'd be perfect for hunting, and he told her she could take it if she wanted, leaving her stunned. She leaned in, eyes sparkling, and asked if it was really true, then she thanked Izo. The guy couldn't stop smiling at how good it looked, and he promised he'd make her a scabbard, but warned it would take time. She nodded and agreed. The girl dashed off to sleep, and he finally turned his mind to what he'd do next. He can crank out even more knives just by dropping the level down, and judging by Samia's reaction, that level is gold for selling. First, he'll flood the market with new knives and farm tools, then he'll sell them off and finally earn his living. He'd heard there was a town beyond the forest with a buzzing weekend market, and now his blacksmithing business is finally taking off. The man snapped that he was finished, and Samia shot back her thanks. Then ISO leaned in and asked how she felt. The girl admitted she still couldn't hunt, but at least she could move like herself again. Right after that, he told her to hit the city tomorrow. A week has slid by since that talk, and while the city keeps moving, ISO has been busy crafting knives, hoes, and sickles, ready to sell them for cash. Their rank is basic model. Samia's recovery is going great, so sometimes they head out together, and those walks let Ezel soak in the area, learning its layout and the whole local ecology around them. They stumbled into a whole world of plants and animals, and right there, ISO put his new knowledge to work on the spot like he'd been waiting for this moment. He fretted that wild wolves and wild boars might jump out on their road, but Samia grinned and said it would all be fine, because she could smell Iso's strength. He was convinced Samia was stronger than him, but he swore he still hadn't fully tapped his own power, so he figured with total confidence he could tough it out and survive this forest. They had to slog through the forest for 2 full hours just to hit a main road, then another hour to finally reach the city, and since Samia's a beastman, not a single animal or robber crossed their path. The road stayed eerily quiet all the way. The girl jutted her finger at the city. Izo's grin lit up instantly, because right behind that wall a flea market was waiting. In this city, the market sprawls right outside the outer walls, and the traders show up every single day. Since the whole place runs on trade, you don't have to pay a cent to enter or leave. Suddenly, the guard snapped his head toward the guys and asked if he could steal the question, and with a slick salesman grin, Iso jumped in, asking what they wanted to know. The guard snapped that he'd never seen those guys around here and demanded to know why they'd come, and ISO shot back that he was a blacksmith. He rolled up to the flea market to hawk his wares, and when the guard demanded to inspect them, Iso nodded and said sure. Then the guard went wide-eyed in shock. He told them everything was fine and they could push through, then warned them clearly not to cause a single problem. To get into the flea market, you fork over 1 silver coin, no exceptions. Once he paid, they shoved a trading counter into his hands and handed him a wooden sign stamped with a trade permit, and the spot. That's grabbed by whoever gets there first. Once we got there, I saw the best seats were already taken. Samia scanned the room and pointed to one of the outermost counters. Iso took one look at the place and grinned. Turned out it wasn't so bad at all. Then he laughed and swore that today he'd be under Samia's protection. 2 hours later, they were still staring at empty hands, no sales, no buyers. He hawked his products nonstop, trying to reel in anyone who passed, but it all fizzled out. Turns out he'd only ever been a programmer, and selling was exactly his skill set. Samia insisted it was only noon when, bam, someone demanded how the trade was going, and it was that guard again. Iso snapped that everything was a disaster, and the guard just smirked, saying Samia was lucky, and then he asked to buy 1 knife. Right when the man was checking their luggage, the other guy dropped a bombshell. He'd spotted razor-sharp knives, while his own blade is already wrecked and there's no way to fix or sharpen it. He was relieved they hadn't snapped up every knife from Iso yet. Then the guy slid a knife over with a grin. The guard leaned in and praised how sharp it was, and when they finally asked the price, he learned it only cost 5 silver, and he couldn't believe how cheap it was. After huddling with Samia, they agreed to keep the price low just to secure at least a little profit. Then the guard snatched up a knife on the spot. That purchase was the very first cash Isa ever got for what he did with his own hands. The guard warned that if the blade came out too sharp, he'd vouch for ISO to the guards back in his unit, while the man confidently swore the knife would be razor-sharp. The guys were grinning, and Samia clocked that Iso was buzzing with joy, pride practically beaming off him. Then 3 hours passed with 0 sales, and he realized the demand for agricultural tools was running painfully low. The guys were already stuffing their bags when someone suddenly blurted, "Leaving already," and the guards marched up, making Isop panic, convinced he was about to get in trouble. The menacing man pressed, asking if Marius snagged his knife from those guys. Then Ezio shot back, "Is it the same kid guard?" The man grinned and said he knew they were here, then demanded, "Got any knives left?" Isel blinked in confusion, but flashed the blades to prove it, only for the man to demand, "Now hand over everything the others have." Iso blinked in total confusion, and the guard added that Marius stormed back from lunch and started flashing his knife like he was hunting for trouble. It's insanely sharp, like top-tier sharp, and everyone's scrambling for it because they need one and they want to grab everything. The seller snaps, "Only 8 knives left, and each one costs 40 silver." The guards move in fast, hauling it all away while they can't stop staring at how razor-sharp it is. Once the guards finally walked off, the man slid up to Izo, and Izo immediately started bombarding him with apologies for the trouble. Turns out the old man wasn't mad at all. He was just stunned, but he was genuinely thrilled that Izo managed to sell everything. After a while, the guys finally headed home, and Samia let out a huge breath of relief because they'd managed to sell every last knife. Then Izo turned to the girl and thanked her for everything, knowing that since they were completely out, he'd have to spend the next stretch of time restocking. Now ISO is fired up. He's sure he can go way beyond simple repairs and straight orders, and honestly, he should have tried forging a long sword, but if he can strike a deal with a merchant, he'll crank up the reach of what he sells. So yeah, don't just trust farm tools and axes, test them yourself, because then he still had to build her own room. Iso's sister came up and asked if he could make arrowheads, so he fired back, "Do you need them?" She said it was a must for hunting once she gets better, and Samia was like, "Then please make his arrows too, it'll be perfect when that time comes." What? He agreed to make them for her, and Samia practically lit up with joy. Tanoya Azo couldn't resist that compliment. Today he's still locked in forging knives, then he'll turn his attention to making tips for Samia, crafting a clay mold first, pouring in heated steel, and sitting tight until it cools and hardens. Edso demanded, "Why not take it, sharpen it up, and once I'm done, snap it onto the handle." He'll build a giant saw to fell trees, then crank up the axe he tried to sell earlier, only now he's grinding away, cutting the saw's teeth all day long, and by the next morning he's already back at it. He swung hard and slammed the tree, then froze when the axe suddenly locked up, and a split second later, boom, there was a massive crash. The whole tree got chopped down in one brutal hit and started to rocket down the hill, and the guys just stared in shock, because they realized that if he didn't stay careful, his second life would be over any second. Once that fallen tree was ready, they raised the axe and started chopping it into small pieces. Samia's the man, and the girl practically shouted that it was finally time to use the thing. Iso admitted she's not fully healed yet, so we better tread carefully, because once they start, they'll haul that huge saw and saw back and forth between them to drop the tree. The tree crashed down and ISO swore it looked like tofu. Meanwhile, the girl burst out laughing, saying it sounded weird, and then ISO snapped, "Don't laugh that hard," because her shaking was getting out of control. After a while, they were finally done, and the man cracked that it was moving fast enough that, if they kept this pace, they'd be finished by the end of the day. Samia said it usually takes longer, but ISO's tools are straight up amazing. Then the man just stayed silent. But the real reason he can forge these incredible tools is the solid knowledge he started with pure, hard-earned know-how. And in his second life he made a vow, he won't coast on privilege, he'll win by his own hands. Still, he couldn't help but feel grateful. Those gifts from the start were finally usable, because deep down, he knew he was only a guest in this world. So he taps into this power just enough to live like everyone else, and refuses to abuse a single bit of it. Then, at the dead of night, he's still working late when Samia turns to him. He blurted out what it was, and the girl instantly remembered. He'd promised he wanted her to live here. He nodded and confirmed it, and Samia pressed, "So it still counts, right?" He agreed on the spot, and when the girl finally spoke up, she lit up with pure gratitude for the way he'd helped her. Even after she showed up, she still couldn't change much, but helping him with his work was a blast, and over food they kept trading stories, then walking together afterward was the sweetest part. She loved nothing more than watching him throw himself into his work, like the whole room was better because he was doing it. That's why she asked, "Will everything be okay if we live together?" And he grinned like, "If I'm saying yes, then I don't see any problem at all." Samia lit up with joy and smacked his back in pure gratitude. Then he shot up, yelling that it hurt like crazy. She burst into laughter, and the man insisted he was finally done. She stared at the tip with pure admiration, and Samia blurted that it was amazing, so he shot back his thanks right away. Slow as a whisper, but ISO's place in this world is getting forged right now. Every tiny choice he makes today chains into who he'll become tomorrow, and he can only hope this is the very first spark in a long parade of good, joyful moments. The guards in the city laughed with delight as they bought the knife, then immediately started waiting for Ezza's next visit, because next time they planned to grab even more. Right then the girl swallowed hard, apologized, and the guard snapped, "What's wrong?" The girl leaned forward and asked to see the knife, her eyes locked on it like she couldn't wait to find out more. Yuzo thrust the bag into her hands and said she just barely pulled herself together, so if she sensed danger, she was to bolt back home at once. Samia nodded like she understood, then turned and left. The man called after her, warning her not to push herself too hard. After that, he could finally head to work, because today he had to refill the shelves, and that meant starting to forge long swords too. After he checked that the female molds from yesterday were bone dry, he split them wide, yanked out the male form, snapped everything back together, and packed the whole setup into a barrel of sand, then poured in molten iron. Once everything finally cooled, I yanked the clay off and pulled the iron free. Then he hammered and filed away every burr around it, heated it up, and nudged its shape just a little. At last, the sword's forged and sharpened, the final touches are locked in, the tube is mounted, wrapped tight in leather around the handle, and then, without wasting a second, he carves a scabbard from wood. Usually only specialists handle all this stuff, but with priority mode cranked up, he's free to tackle some of it himself in the workshop. He made a brand shaped like a little cat, Dory, the cute pet he had on SNS, and boom, the first stage was finished. Over the next few days, they're going to crank out regular models by the hundreds and churn out cheaper knives, while he personally forged that sword himself. Iso swung his ready-made sword, then Samya blurted, "What are you doing?" And his face instantly turned red. He tried to explain, but all he managed was a nervous greeting. Then the girl said she was just at home. Iso noticed her blush and demanded to know what happened, but the girl shook her head and insisted everything was fine. She was just glowing with pure happiness. He got it, then flashed a smile. Iso said it was great having someone waiting for her at home, and Samya nodded right back with a smile. Iso never got that kind of happiness in this world, so he leaned in and asked how the hunt went, and the girl grinned and said she'd killed a tree deer. She tore out his organs and dunked him in the lake, claiming they'd haul him back tomorrow morning. Then he choked out questions about the arrows and the knife, and the girl grinned, saying they were perfect. Next morning they dragged the deer inside and started butchering it on the spot. Sami laid out every step, and Iso jumped in to help. Samya's quick hands and Iso's razor-sharp blade clicked together. Before anyone could blink, the skin slipped away and the meat was cleanly cut out. Samya said that's how it ends, and yeah, she made it sound quick, but Ezro didn't buy it because slicing the meat was anything but hard. The moment they butchered it, the pieces looked just like the man's familiar meat. He finally understood that back in the old world, fruits tasted sweet and meat was chopped into bite-sized pieces because of the way humans lived. The guys built a bonfire and shoved dinner onto the heat, and then Iso snapped. So what did Samya do with the animal's organs? She shot back that she dumped the giblets and bones in the forest, then let the wolves come feast, just like the man pointed out, sitting there staring at her words. He dug in and said with pure admiration that he hadn't tasted fresh meat in ages. Then the girl smirked and promised, "Next time I'm catching a bird fried, they taste way better." The man grinned and said it sounded great, then swore he'd genuinely wait. Swami smiled right back because good nutrition is one of the biggest keys to a peaceful life. They hauled the last of the meat to the workshop to dry it out, because Iso had been dreaming of making jerky for ages. The next morning, Iso approached Samya with respect, then she snapped that it was disgusting. He shot back that it was cruel, and demanded to know why she wouldn't help him if she wasn't hunting today. The girl lit up and said yes, and when he asked her if she wanted to pluck the burrs while they worked, she practically couldn't wait to help. Then he asked Samya for backup, and together they churned out enough goods to hit the city again. At the entrance, Larius snapped into recognition the second he saw them. The guard blurted that he'd been panicking since those guys hadn't shown up in ages. Iso stepped in and said, "Because of me, they're gone. We already used up every last thing they had." What? Mario immediately clocked that Iso showed up with swords today too, and he teased, "I might swing by later to watch this." Today they ended up next door to that kind man, and right away Iso nudged the question, asking why they weren't grabbing supplies while they still had time, since they needed salt and wheat. The girl nodded and agreed. He laid it all out and told him, just sit down and chill. The day was bright and calm, until a rich man rolled up out of nowhere and asked to see the sword. Once Iso agreed, the man darted through everything and then stared with amazement, praising him like he'd just witnessed something great. Then he blurted that he'd buy 4 and Ezzo froze, asking, wide-eyed, if the guy was really sure, and the stranger just grinned and said he was a traveling merchant who wanted one for himself and would ship the rest to sell elsewhere. Iso realized he might score a bigger break if he could sell those blades somewhere else, so he pushed the plan hard, sold the swords, and thanked the man. Iso couldn't stop smiling. He couldn't help dreaming that one day, once they'd saved up enough money, him and Samya would finally pull off a real business trip together. With the eyes staring outside, Marius hustled his colleagues over to help the man, and the usual sword model sold out. Only one high-end model was left, and Iso refused to sell it. With a grin, he said they'd already sold enough swords to make their exit. Samya suddenly clocked something weird. She said she barely ever gets to spot a dwarf, and Iso couldn't stop thinking about it. The girl explained that down here they're basically a myth, so rare you almost never meet one. Before now, she'd only seen a single dwarf back in the forest, and she'd been the one who led him to the road. Then, right out of nowhere, the girl spun on her heel and headed straight for the guys. She blurted to Iso, "Did you forge those knives for the guards?" And he nodded. Then she locked eyes on them, asked if she could get a closer look, and Iso agreed without hesitation. She stared down at the knife, then her eyes snapped bright as lightning, and she turned to Iso and demanded he show her his best blade. The luxury model sits way above the regular one. Iso wouldn't even show it because he'd already decided to sell it to a man who truly deserved it, and when that girl spotted the knife, surprise hit him hard, like he just knew something even better was waiting. Iso pulled out a luxury model and demanded the girl look at him. She swallowed her pride, apologized, and then lifted her sword, staring hard at the blade while Iso clocked how huge her hands were for her size. The world went dead silent. The girl spun it around in every direction, scrutinizing every detail, while Samya and Iso just stood there awkwardly on the sidelines, watching in silence. The man said she'd been staring at that blade for ages. While Iso was busy meeting and sending off new customers, the girl barely blinked, her eyes still locked on the sword, and Iso hesitated, awkward as hell. Then she dropped her blade, thanked Iso with real respect, and handed the sword back like it mattered, while the man stared at her, totally baffled. The girl blurted out that she only had one request, then she dropped to the ground and planted her hands immediately. She dropped into a deep bow and begged Iso to take her in as his apprentice, and the moment he saw her kneel, his surprise hit like lightning. At the market, the girl lined in and told me her name was Reich Moritz. Then she lit up, saying how thrilled she was to meet you. They couldn't just ignore the dwarf kneeling in the middle of the street, and Echo was already set on talking to her first, because he refused to let Samya get swallowed up in the crowd. When the name finally hit her ears, the girl went wide-eyed in shock. Reich snapped back that wasn't true. Moritz isn't a last name at all, it's the workshop's name, because dwarves are basically clans that band together to build one, and anyone born into it takes that name as their own. Reich from the Moritz workshop was the girl's name. Then Iso stepped up, told everyone who he was, and even messed up his own name a little. The girl asked if those guys were from the north, and Iso nodded hard, saying that because of what happened, he'd ended up in the Black Forest and was forging blades there as a blacksmith. The girl clocked it, then lit up and said she couldn't believe it, because back where she came from, she'd never seen a blacksmith make stuff like this. Iso fired a question at her, "Why do you want to be my student?" And the girl answered that dwarves start training at a specific age, so Iso and his brothers stormed out of the workshop to get their studies done, while Reich roamed far and wide hunting for a teacher. They hunt down the best workshops, jump in as students, then rush back home to their native shop, armed with fresh techniques to craft brand new creations, before finally returning to the very workshop where they trained. That's how dwarves live. Iso straight up asked if they feared leaking their production secrets. Rick flashed a grin and said it was a proud honor for the workshop to have a dwarf as an apprentice, and for the dwarf, growing up and getting those skills back was a huge win. And when Rick finally rolled into this city a few days ago, she stumbled on a knife in a guard's grip, one of the very blades Iso had made. Since he's a blacksmith, Reich doesn't find him in the city. He hunts him down at the free market instead, and once the brothers are gone, Reich just lets them slip away and waits for that man to show up here again. Iso demanded, "So my brothers already found a teacher." Reich shot back, "They went to the workshop they were told to go to." Then Reich warned, "If you back out now, you're on your own to track down another workshop." So knew it'd be downright dangerous for a young girl to ride alone. Samya stayed quiet, eyes locked on him. The guy had to say yes to teach her, but only after he laid down 4 strict conditions. And Samya listened like every word mattered. He hated the idea of her sacrificing herself, so she couldn't do that again, plus the house was too tight, meaning they'd have to tear into it and build extensions. And because of the last deal, she promised to help him, right alongside blacksmithing, and the girl nodded in agreement, while that final condition still hung in the air. He told her they didn't need any stiff formalities, he'd be Reich and she could call him Iso. The girl snapped that she couldn't do it, and the master just froze in shock. Reich stepped in, saying she was still a student, so she had to respect her master. Then Samya erupted into loud laughter. That's how they settled everything, and that evening they headed home. Then, just like I said, he jabbed his finger straight at their house and the workshop, and Reich lit up with delight. When they rolled in, Iso asked how the girl's legs were, and he couldn't help thinking that, with all that luggage, she clearly wasn't used to all that walking. The girl swore she was tough, and suddenly it didn't feel as hard to walk as he'd expected, so Iso grinned and said she could drop her luggage, then go wash her hands. After that, he thanked Samya, and she felt his eyes catch her fear. Because Rick was weighing heavy on her mind, she picked the safest route, and that's exactly why the girl was shocked he'd noticed. Ezo thought she was sweetly, secretly happy. Then later they all gathered for dinner, and when Ezo realized there wasn't a place for her, she decided she'd sleep with Samya for now. The girl shrugged and said she wouldn't get in their way, so she'd crash on the floor and leave the double bed to the guys. Iso just grinned and reminded her they always slept apart anyway, so no one had anything to worry about. The girl gawked and demanded in pure disbelief, "Wait, aren't you married?" Samia blurted that she and Iso weren't some couple like that. Reich shot back, "Looks like it." And the guy just stood there wondering if people with completely different ranks could even marry in the first place. Hizo shot back that things weren't that simple, and up to now there's zero connection between him and Samia. Then the girl blinked, totally stunned, and demanded what up to now even meant. Samia blushed hard and crashed onto the table. Reich snapped to the truth that they were a family living in the same workshop, and Izo nearly jumped out of his skin hearing that. He grinned and said it really was just like that, and Samia stared back at him with pure admiration. ISO told everyone he owned the workshop, promised he'd use only the room layout he described, and swore nothing would change until they could build more. Then the very next day, she kicked off the plan. After a night's rest, they cleared the yard for the house extension and dug deep holes for the poles, while Samia slipped out to hunt and they stayed with Reich. She's clearly used to this kind of hard work, with muscles that look built for it. So they were cutting along at a solid pace, then Samia grinned and yelled that she was back. Iso met her and fired off, "How'd it go?" And Samia said, proud as ever, "I took down a deer." Right then, she snapped her gaze and asked what happened to Reich. She said she once wanted to chop wood, but it felt like a hot knife just slid through, effortless, unreal, so she couldn't figure out why it cut so fiercely. Samia smiled and admitted that it still shocks her, and the first time she saw it, she couldn't help but feel scared too. Yusa stared at the idea like it hit her in the chest, and the man told Rinka that tomorrow they'd kick off blacksmithing, while construction ran right alongside it. The girl lit up and nodded yes. Izo decided he'd whip up a female uniform before nightfall, and honestly, it was a brilliant plan. They had to team up to take down that monstrous tree deer Samia bagged the morning before, and after a quick breather, they dove back in, until they stuffed the women's uniforms ESO made yesterday onto themselves and started working. Reich has done this 1,000 times, her hands never slow down and she keeps pushing hard, then they grab a quick bite and forge a knife. But ISO had no clue how to pass a privileged skill to Rika. Then Rick showed up and caught the confusion written all over his face. He decided to come clean, then Izo apologized, admitting he'd never had a student before and didn't know what he was supposed to teach her. The girl grinned and promised she'd watch and study everything, telling ISO not to stress, she wouldn't miss a single flick of his hands. First, he'll forge a normal-looking knife model built for mass production, and while Reich watched, he hammered the steel at full speed. When he was done, the man declared that the blade could finally be sharpened. Then he turned to Reich and demanded, "Did you learn anything?" The girl nodded with a grin, praising her master as incredible, and whispered that she could almost hear the voice of iron. Startled, ISO demanded how she knew, and she said it was obvious. He wasn't taking it seriously, not really giving his all, and even the sword he was showing her back then didn't match. Iso told me this knife was built for mass production, and then he pushed me to make the model for him, showing me step by step how to do it first. He also said Rika had to craft one too, and the girl nodded right on the spot. Right after that, she got to work, and ISO couldn't believe it because he'd never seen anyone else do it. Suddenly he went still, locking onto Reich's movements, and when the girl thrust a knife into his hands, she demanded his thoughts, while Iso silently clocked it. Her work was solid, no worse than his usual model. He swore the knife was solid, but he still felt a tiny dip in power, so he promised it'll only get stronger. And Izo, all confidence, insisted Reich could forge something just as amazing as the sword she showed her. The girl lit up and promised she'd give it a shot, and Izo grinned, saying he'd whip up another one for her to binge today. This time he was going all in. The first time he watched a man forge iron, it clicked. Because of his privilege, he wasn't just watching anymore. He already knew how to swing the hammer and exactly when and where to strike. He can feel the water's temperature and its tough bite, then mold it exactly how he needs without losing a single bit of quality, because that skill didn't fall from the sky. Riker and the other masters busted their tails, training and learning on their own from day one. He started weighing what he absolutely couldn't teach her. If he wouldn't say it, maybe she could still copy it on her own, and Reich watched it all unfold. After he was done, the man thanked her for waiting, and when she reached for the knife, she froze in sheer shock. Reich said it was mind-blowing, and then admitted in pure awe that a human really could create something this incredible. Even a dwarf couldn't pull it off. Izo swore he'd hand her the knife, and Reich shot back, asking if he truly didn't care. The man nodded and said he couldn't sell it because she was his student, his family. She grinned with pure joy and swore she'd dedicate herself to this place. He told her to go for it, and just like that, Samia burst into the room. She grinned and said the meat and skins were finally processed. Then her breath caught in her throat when she saw Rick forging a knife, while Iz watched like he already knew what was coming, and soon after they cooked up fried meat. Reek clocked that the man was tossing magic around, but ISO said it was just basic spells, while the girl stared in awe at what he could do. Then Sammy burst out that he even had a last name. Pride lit up her face as Reich demanded ISO's last name, and she blurted Tanuya. Right then, she declared she was now Reich Tanuya, while Samya stared in shock, asking how that even made sense. Reich couldn't believe her own ears. She swore that was her master's family name, and if this was Tanya's workshop, then that meant Tanya's student was Reich herself. Iso wrote it all down, every detail. Iso snapped that he didn't want his last name slapped on the workshop. He wanted it called Iso. The girl shot back instantly, then I'm Reich Iso. He figured custom or not, using his name would still feel painfully awkward, and Samya burst out, calling it unfair, then swore she'd use that name too. Iso just froze, clueless about what to say to this kid. Then Samya shot back, asking if she could go by Samya Tanuya or Samya Azo. He couldn't stop thinking, I invited her to live here, so I better follow through, and once he said yes, it was clear this was family, so everyone lit up with pure happiness. He'd always thought he was just a guest in this world, and that he'd never leave anything behind, but now something else has crashed into his life. At night, he couldn't stop thinking about it, because if Wright can build something like this in this world, then she's got real, serious talent. Seriously, back in his old world, a blade this razor-sharp was basically impossible to forge, and Iso couldn't stop wondering what his special skill was about to unleash here. Reich didn't just show up, he joined the family as an apprentice right alongside Samya, and because he treated every task dead serious while Samya kept stepping in to help, Iso finally got the breathing room to focus on his own work. Their ISO workshop is cranking out way more with every passing day. About once a week they hit the market to sell their products, and ISO keeps running into the same familiar faces. Marius told everyone that these days people keep spotting Iso's goods and demanding to know who's behind them. Then the man thanked the guards for that loud, perfect advertisement. The old man promised he'd come shopping later, and when he did, the place was packed with knives, long swords, and spearheads, but not all of it was the same quality. Mass-produced and made to be used everywhere, the price gets set by the market just so an ordinary housewife can afford them, and people rave about her razor-sharp skills. A middle-class model gets snapped up by folks who know their way around top-tier blades, price feels fair, then it can be flipped for more, especially if the wholesaler hits the exact kind of buyer-friendly territory experts swear by. The newest model hidden from everyone's eyes, and ISO made the call, she'd only sell it to the ones who were truly worthy, top tier. ISO poured every ounce of privilege into forging that blade, so sharp it practically dares you to sell it, because even if the quality is high and deadly, they can't make it an official product unless it hits the market, and that whole idea leaves ISO completely baffled. Soon everything vanished off the shelves, gone. Samya figured their customers were singing their praises. Then Reich leaned in and asked, so, are we replenishing the ore reserves yet? She demanded to know who would be supplying him, the house and workshop they lined up for him, because they've got everything right now, but the supplies are already running dry. He figured it was worth asking, then out of nowhere someone called to them, and the moment the man heard they depacked their things, he bolted over here. Iso swore he'd nailed the timing. Turns out the man's generosity swept everything up, and the whole crew was over the moon. But the stuff was so damn popular that the man got pushed to buy even more, and if Ezo had seen that coming, he would have burned 10 extra nights just to deliver everything. The man praised Iso as a hard worker, and the second guy snapped back that he just wanted to get his hands on silver, while Iso kept hammering iron day after day. The man snapped, this is exactly what I need, and swore he'd open a store in this city that wouldn't be ordinary at all. Then Iso congratulated him, right on the spot. The man bragged that he'd handled tough people before and had the right connections, then pushed the idea of a store that sells it, claiming that compared to the market, their shelves have no limits. Iso clocked it right away. Then the man asked whether Iso would let the blacksmith's tools and weapons be sold there, straight up asking if he was absolutely certain. He knew Iso's swords were the real deal, but the blacksmith couldn't shake one thought. Those blades weren't meant to rot in this city, not when more and more people kept staring at Iso's work and hunting for a way to meet the blacksmith. Iso leaned in and asked if the guy had a wholesale supplier, and once he nodded yes, that was it, everything was locked in. Camillo stepped up, introduced himself, and lit up saying he was thrilled to meet you. Then Iso followed suit, introduced himself too. Camillo said that with skills like that, Iso could live anywhere he wanted. Then he flat out admitted there was nothing anyone could do, because the beastman and the dwarf were already riding alongside him. Wholesale dates hit once a week, and SO will warn you ahead of time if anything changes, Camille agreed. Iso suddenly asked, can I ask you a favor? Ore, coal, and every other resource were running out and he needed help, so Camillo promised, sure, I'll find it and buy everything. ISO told Camillo he'd be saving them, but the man snapped back that he'd claw it straight out of the payment for the goods. Izio finally tracked down a place to buy the materials. Those doors open next week, and he'll show up with the goods the moment they're ready. A week later, he stepped into the store. It's massive and the whole room gasped. Ezo walks in, eyes blazing, and straight up thinks it's incredible. His stuff was laid out on display, and Samaya said, "Looks like it's not for sale in this form." Iso nodded along, and Camillo immediately spotted the guys. Then he shouted for them to come upstairs and talk. Iso showed up today with a knife, a sword, and one more blade, then demanded how much he'd have to pay, only for the merchant to say, "Everything," like their wares always sell out, and Iso immediately pressed whether Camillo was a famous trader. He snapped back that they stocked a ton of products because they sell to everyone, and that's why he expanded the store and made it bigger. Camillo couldn't stop wondering what Izo would do after he demanded a custom sword. While Izo figured Camillo was really asking who the blade was for, turns out they couldn't even begin until an order came in. Camillo demanded to know if Izo was backing out, and the man snapped that he wanted to pick the buyer himself. Camillo pushed for them to verify the man's identity and sword skills so ISO could judge for sure, and then the guy promised, come to his workshop alone, and he'd hand the customer a reward. To reach the workshop, he has to cut through a forest where wolves stalk every step. If he can survive that path, he's got the skills to make it. He'll hand Camillo the power to judge the character, and if the merchant thinks the customer fits, he'll spill exactly where they are. Then, once they're on board, he'll turn to the girls and ask for their permission. They didn't bat an eye. Iso just asked if the materials had arrived, and when they said they'd gotten a ton of stuff, Camillo called out. He marched us straight into a massive warehouse, and Camillo showed me around, while Azo said this should hold them over for now. Then he demanded, so what's it cost? He could keep the supply rolling non-stop. Then after ISO heard the price, he figured it was just a quarter of wholesale and nearly balked at how ridiculously cheap it was, but Camillo shrugged and said it wasn't scary at all. ISO shot the man a thank you, but there was no way he could lug all that by hand. He asked if Camillo had considered a cart, only for the merchant to shake his head. He claimed he had a cart he wanted to toss, but said it was worth the trouble, so Ezo shot back, "How much?" And the guy laughed, offering it for free since he'd never use it again. He leaned in and demanded why Camillo was so kind, and the man shrugged, claiming he was a supplier with a bright future ahead. You've got to find a supplier who delivers quality without ripping you off, and Ezo, he should be grateful for that. The man caught on and told Camillo he's genuinely grateful. Then later the guys piled into the car and drove back. Ezo warned it's a bit rough getting off the highway, but he'll make it home. The guys jumped in and offered to clear the road, and Reich said anyone ready to place an order would be able to reach them without a hassle. Suddenly Samia caught a whiff of the wolf, and they had no choice but to stop right there and wait until he finally moved on. Iso clocked how they kept showing up right like every morning, and Samia snapped that a brood was coming soon, while Iso grinned, saying they might spot them even with the cubs. Reich leaned in and asked if the wolves around here were so calm they never even attacked, and Samaya just shrugged. There's tons of deer and rabbits, so nobody ever panics over the prey. Reich had his own crew too, and Iso figured the stronger ones wouldn't get targeted as much. She wasn't fully convinced, but she refused to gamble with everyone's safety. She realized she had no business being there alone, and Samia snapped that Rika should take them outside with her. Wolves are smarter than people think, more social, too, not like the wolves of the plains. I couldn't stop wondering if they'd changed just to survive, or if this was evolution taking shape. Out here there are forest wolves and bears, and danger is still everywhere, so Rika had to stay sharp. Then, out of nowhere, he froze. That bear that attacked Samia is still lurking in the forest, and even a beastman would be in real trouble the moment it comes at them, because out here, the woods feel downright terrifying. That gigantic bear snapped its gaze away right after it finished its meal. Iso swung the hammer into the iron, and afterward he couldn't stop smiling. He figured it didn't look too shabby at all. Rank flashed a real smile. She looked even better than before, and she was thrilled they managed to grab good materials. Izu nodded, swore he believed her, and said they should keep going. They shoved the bought cast iron into a magic furnace. No slags formed, ever, and Reich's eyes lit up because it could be used again and again without wrecking the furnace. This gig usually runs on machines and a full crew, but here the privileges open the door. He pities the craftsman, yet he can't help feeling thrilled because this chance lets him work deep in the forest. After a couple days, everything finally clicked into place. Now he could focus on the house this week. Samia showed up, asked if Iso was done, and dragged him along with her. He barged in and found the roof already finished, and the man hurried to thank Reich for all the hard work. She shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal, and Izu immediately apologized for not showing up sooner. The girls threw themselves into the extension work, and he plunged into blacksmithing. Then the girls absolutely crushed it. He told them it must have been brutal, and Reich even declared that their strength beats human limits by far. They told him he could count on them, and Ezo shot back a quick thanks. Then he turned to Camillo and ordered him to go get Bedlin. All she has to do is build the doors and furniture. Then Reich was shocked when she insisted on putting up the doors herself. He couldn't wrap his head around her, because Reich told her that even in a noble house, doors aren't hung for just anyone, they're reserved for guests or the owner. Samia didn't live in a normal house, and she had no clue. Esso swore her voice sounded like it came straight from another world. He needs them, and back in his house, every single door will swing open. Samia asked Iso if he was heading into the city the other day, and he shot back that he'd stay right here. Reich demanded to know what he was supposed to do. Then Izo realized he hadn't truly rested since landing in this world. Stability mattered most to him, so he kept his moves measured, but the store's sales were booming, and he even had spare cash to burn. So he decided to hit pause for a bit, and as they walked, Samia leaned in and asked what Iso really thought. He said the river looked perfect, and they instantly decided to camp there, just a solid hour's walk from home. Days dragged by in a slow, easy routine, and he wasn't wasting it on anything he didn't want. He grabbed a long vacation and threw himself into the one thing that sounded perfect, fishing. He snatched a thread at home, bent a nail into a fish hook, and put together a whole fishing rod. Then he hunted down the bait hiding under the rocks. He braced for horror from the girls, but they didn't even blink, so after that, they teamed up and went fishing side by side, and the whole world went oddly quiet. He thought it was a perfect day. Then he started scrolling through the days at the company, and Iso began living better, but work still clung to him like a workaholic's curse. Iso had no clue how long he'd been resting like that. Then Samia gasped and Iso snapped, "Hold up, let the fish have its bite." He even told me exactly when to yank it out. The girl yanked a fish from the water, and Rick told Samia, "Set her down, she'll pull the hook out." And ever since they started talking, Iso has been opening up more and more. He sat there finally at peace. Then the guys kicked off lunch afterward, and the fishing haul turned out great. But Iso hauled in 0 fish, so Samia instantly thought he had a thirst for blood, yet Iso was terrified. The girl insisted fish sense danger when a predator s nearby, and the man brushed it off, saying there was no rush since the whole day was still wide open. They finally crashed into bed to rest, soaking up a rare kind of vacation where you don't have to chase results. Just breathe, kick back, and let yourself relax for once. For half a day there wasn't a single fish. Samia couldn't hunt one down and take the shot. Ezo said the girl tore out everything but the heart, then left the rest behind. He demanded to know why she didn't bring the heart, so Samia yanked it and buried it in the earth, because when she finally dies, the forest will trade life for hers, and that heart, it's the soul made real. What they leave above ground, wolves swoop in and tear it up. And yes, some of the pack already know it's coming, so they're lurking right nearby. Animals have their own rules, and one day, Izo is going to get pulled into that same fate. He stumbled in from another world, desperate to find out if he could belong to the forest, so Ezel shifted the place for him, but there was not a single fish. The sun dropped toward the horizon, and that was it, time to give up. 2 caught fish, 1 fish per person, and yeah, so far he's been cursed with bad luck, because even if it's just for fun, he wants to feel closer to nature. He swore he'd land at least 1 fish, but Samio was laughing his face off. He snapped, "That's not true." Then the fish shot up and started pecking like crazy, so he yanked on the rod. He finally calmed down, yanked it free, and hauled the fish right out. He hauled in a fish, practically bragging to the whole world, and yeah, fishing wasn't exactly working miracles, but they were fine because the rest went perfectly. So stared at the girls, already imagining tomorrow. He'd get back to work and start building the house with his own hands. The guys were buzzing with joy. O told them they crushed it, and boom, the extension was finally finished, with the house's foundation already set in place. They crammed windows and doors into every new room, then slid in beds and shelves in the bedrooms for all the accessories. New rooms popped up as the girls' bedrooms. So rushed back to his own room while the old study got flipped into a living room, and today everyone finally got to head to their rooms, except Reich, who couldn't stop trembling because it was his first time, while Samia was practically bouncing, itching to sow the field. They grab meat and nuts, but vegetables come with a price, so Iso decides he's done relying on anyone, and he wants to grow them himself, going as independent as he possibly can. That scrapped hoe and sickle ended up paying off. Rick insisted she didn't farm, and the master already knew the ropes. Samia nodded, and Izzo fused what he learned in the old world with what he picked up after rebirth. So yeah, if he's a little weird, that's fine. The truth is, he didn't know everything back then. That night he climbed onto the bed, and he stayed there for a long, long time. He's been nodding off at his desk ever since he got here, still stuck with that office worker skill he despises, not even sure it's the right move. because sure, his body keeps getting younger, but deep down he's the same old man, and now he can't stop thinking he needs to get more work done. Some stranger was marching through the forest when Aizu asked, "What's going on?" And the girl snapped back, "They're here, someone's come." A hard knock slammed the door as a voice shouted that she'd come from Camillo and demanded a sword. Azo felt the sound hit like thunder, then he threw the door open. Iso greeted the guest with a grin, and then the girl lined in and asked if he was the artisan who made Camillo for the store. Her name was Helen. Iso introduced himself, assuming she was just some loud nuisance. Then he opened the door and let her into the house as the very first visitor, and the guys were like, "Wait her." The man demanded if she'd come alone, and Helen nodded yes. Ezo then pressed about the wolves, only to hear that they never attacked her. Finding the place was a nightmare, but she followed the smoke like it was a beacon, until Ezra clocked it. She was so fierce the wolves wouldn't even come near, and the girl told them they lived in a truly great place. The deal was simple: walk through the forest alone, then show up at the workshop, and the girl did exactly that, no hesitation. Aizo promised he'd forge her a weapon and then leaned in, asking what she should do next. She tore the knives free and called herself a mercenary. She's done this before, but right now she needs something far deadlier. On the battlefield, you can't always baby your weapons, but her life hinges on whether she can swing these two daggers. Every one of them is gouged and scratched from endless battles. ISO has forged deadly weapons and battle-ready gear. If anyone dares to swing the sword he forged, their opponent gets crushed, no matter how strong they think they are. Whatever he makes comes back to bite, guaranteed. That's the truth he lived, and it'll never change. And Aiza, he'll never look away or accept anything less. He refused to get comfortable with that cold, careless way of thinking. Then he snapped that the swords were top-notch, and ISO backed it up, praising the blacksmith's razor-sharp skill. After Helen gave the go-ahead, he handed them over and showed them to Rika. The girl even vouched that he was decent, and Helen knew she did the right thing by reaching out to her master. Helen said, "Even the dwarf is saying it, so yeah, I'm in." And then the man pressed her, "All right, so how would you use it?" And Helen shot back, "What does it even mean?" Aizo was dying to see how swords really worked in the heat of a strike, and when she asked, the girl admitted it was tough to explain, so she promised to teach it the hard way by showing her instead. She shot up and started flexing her techniques, and Aizo couldn't believe how lightning fast she was. He realized one stick was for steady balance and the other was built to slam. Then Helen snapped, saying it felt impossible to fight without an opponent, and begged Aizo to step in and spar with her. The man insisted it was smarter for her to take on Samia since she had the edge in fighting experience, and Helen shot back that he looked way stronger. Samia couldn't even argue. Aizo was convinced he had no combat experience in this world, but this body already knew how to fight, sharp, organized, trained. Samia admitted Aizo was strong, and the man nodded right along with it. Aizo figured she was just putting on a show for him and holding back, but when he begged her to take it easy, she snapped and went for the attack. No jokes, no mercy. Isaac lunged in and slammed the attack aside, then fought back with everything he had, because Helen moved so fast that keeping up with her felt impossible. She moved like lightning. Right when it all jolted, Helen suddenly blurted that he was fine, and the man snapped that he needed a break because if he gets distracted even for a second, something would tear him apart immediately. Being stuck on the move non-stop is brutal. He had to lurch and dodge every one of her attacks, and then he froze, staring, caught off guard like, wait, is she actually joking? When the dust settled, the man breathed out, stunned he'd made it through, glad to be alive. Helen flashed a grin and called him strong. He shot back, asking if he should have just watched her movements instead. Helen only smirked and said she intended to take a couple of punches, then end it. They call her the lightning sword. She's so fast they can only barely keep up, and after she admitted she got carried away, she quickly turned around and apologized. He said he finally understood everything, and then he swore he could knock it out in 2 days, so she had to come back for the third. She asked if it was time for her to head back, and Ezo shot back, "What are you planning?" But the girl grinned and swore she wanted to keep their fight going. Iso snapped that in that case he couldn't forge a weapon at all. Then she nodded, lined in, and demanded he show her the whole creation process. Iso looked completely lost, then said it would take 3 days, and Helen insisted she'd stay right here, while the man froze in hesitation. Suddenly it hit him he'd already set up a guest room. Then the man stared at the girls and snapped that there was nothing he could do. Helen burst into thanks and slapped him hard on the back, and just like that, the Ezel workshop roared to life with its very first customer. After he met Helen, he snapped into action and raced to slam through the rest of the day's work before anything could slow him down. Samia shoved her way up to him and said she already processed them. Then the man spun around, snapped, and told her to dump them in the corner. The girl grinned and said she'd get to work cleaning and trimming her arrowheads. so Iso smiled too, then called Samia by name, spun around, and demanded to know what happened. The man said she'd been getting better and better, then, right after, he thanked her, and the girl lit up with a joyful blush. Happy Samia breezed through her days. On hunting-free days, she threw herself into Izo's workshop, where she mostly handled casting and deburring, and he'd even say she couldn't get enough of it. He threw himself back into the work, praying that someday he'd let her swing that hammer in this very workshop. At the same time, Helen clocked every single stroke Isle threw down, hanging on each one like her life depended on it. Later, the man took a breather, then called every resident from the house and announced it was time to eat. Helen, Samia, and Reich couldn't wait to join in. Helen at the table snapped, "I can't believe there's a huge deer on the road here." Samaya shot back that tree deer can turn into a real nightmare fast, and after that, Helen vowed she'd stay on guard. The girl grinned as she recalled seeing a bear far off, and when she said that, Samia, Isofrose, and the girl all grabbed their stomachs at once. Iso couldn't tell if he was still close, and Helen asked, "What's wrong?" Then he snapped that Samia got mauled by a bear, nearly losing her life, and that he'd finally found her. Helen snapped with worry that she understood, and then she hit back, saying she could have beaten him clean, as long as that weapon had been in perfect shape. Yuzo also told her not to rush into anything, because even for Samia, the beastman who's lived in this forest forever, the monster is straight up dangerous. The man warned them they probably wouldn't be able to track Helen down if anything went wrong. Then the girl blinked in shock, broke into a smile, and said, "Yeah, I get it." Later, Iso whacked his own face, realization hitting hard. This was the first thing he'd ever made to order in his workshop, and he swore he'd pour his whole heart and soul into it. He yanked out the metals and fired up the furnace, and Helen, tomorrow she plans to explore, spent today walking Samia through the forest, teaching her how to hunt. Yesterday, Helen's blades were on my mind, while this man fired up the iron, then swung the hammer across the whole surface, smoothing it down perfectly. With meticulous care, he makes sure the material hits peak strength, and with those God-given eyes, Esso spots something hidden in iron, like a grain woven through its structure. Then he chops it into perfect shape, making every piece match with brutal precision, so you watch the master's moves like your life depends on it. Then he poured the hot metal into the mold, spun on his heel, and told Reich he'd test how tough it was, so Reich had to grab him a short sword in the general model. The girl bolted off to get it, yelling for him to wait just a minute. Iso drove a general model sword straight into a tree, yanked out the finished blade, and swung, crack, right at the trunk, only to get pinned for a split second, but he dug in and gritted his way through, blasting the general model sword apart completely. He let out a happy sigh and swore the sword's power was perfect. Reich stared at him, amazed, and said not a single scratch remained. The man stared at the other sword and said, "You can't sell this anymore," and Reich shot back, "What does that even mean?" She asked if just resharpening wouldn't be enough to bring it back to its original shape. Iso snapped back that the quality would be wrecked, and then he flat out said he wouldn't sell something he'd used for something like that, not ever. Reich said her master is insanely stubborn, and Iso grinned and nodded like, "Yep, that's true," so the man pushed for one better move, reprocess it and use it at home. The girl burst into laughter. She figured the master was stubborn as sin and painfully honest, and then she realized just how dead serious he really was. Even with that crazy strength in his hands, he moved like every bit mattered, pouring in all the focus he could manage, because he'd inched closer to what he wanted back at some earlier point, and Iso was absolutely thrilled to hear it. After hours of grueling, nail-biting work, he finally carved his mark into the sword's hilt, then wiped the sweat from his face and lifted his blade with a grin, shouting that the first one was ready. Reich clutched her hands, eyes blazing with pure awe, and begged to get a closer look at the sword. Iso nodded, and the girl immediately lifted her blade. Reich studied every detail so closely that her cheeks flared with pure admiration. Ezun realized she didn't miss a single thing, and then the man leaned in, asking what she thought about it. Reich froze, staring hard at the sword, and she snapped that this wasn't something you could pull off on talent alone. She apologized for cracking his past open, but she truly believes his leaving, no matter the reason, is a massive loss for the whole North, and Iso couldn't help but blink in surprise at how high she was lifting him. Reich said it with total confidence, and right then the guy finally got it. She wasn't joking. He believed every word because this wasn't just some easy talent. Sometimes he pushes this power to the limit and chases one clear goal, and this time he supercharged the steel, hardening it so it couldn't slice the stone clean in half. But if the priority was razor-sharp accuracy, then yeah, maybe it could work, and that means this is an insane power for a weapon, so he started thinking, what would happen if he could forge it from real steel, not just ordinary metal? Built like a weapon itself, he can forge blades that merge both styles into one, and yeah, he totally could have done it. If he slipped up even once, the weapon could ruin the owner's fate, but the danger of a blade like that would explode far bigger than any good he ever hoped for once it landed in the wrong hands. Iso had no idea he was about to get hit with that much responsibility. Reich stared at him, panicking, and asked if she'd somehow upset the master. The man shook his head, said it wasn't that, and muttered that he'd only thought about it a little. Reich flushed with confusion, staring straight at the master, while Enzo figured he'd dodge any anger over something that hadn't even happened yet. He told the girl to wrap it up as fast as she could for today, and she nodded right away. Then he said he'd worry about the details once an order actually came in. At least Reich could finally be his student, because if he can cook up something people actually value, then that proves everything's been going right so far. Suddenly, Samia and Helen burst into the room and announced they were back, dragging in a mountain of stuff, and the girl explained they'd brought tons of herbs to heal separation. Some are sour, some are sweet. Samia suddenly snapped Izo's name and mumbled, unsure, that wolves were howling nearby, then swore Helen had just spotted a massive black bear. Izo took in every word. Tension gripped the girl's chest, but the man calmly told her he understood, then pushed, "Come on, let's sit down for dinner," and with a warm smile, Samia nodded right back. The room fell into a tense hush. Izo didn't want to risk Samia or Reich, and he knew he had to be careful too. The very next day, he dove right back into blacksmithing. Today marked the second day of the order, and this time Helen wasn't just involved. She was watching the whole thing, and when she stared at the process, the girl laughed and said it looked almost too simple. Reich beamed and said it was all because of the master's insane speed and top-tier craftsmanship. Helen leaned in, asking if Reich could pull off the same feat, and the girl just admitted she didn't know if she'd ever catch the master, even if she trained her whole life. Helen couldn't believe it was taking this long. Iso practically glowed when he heard the praise, until he realized it wasn't earned at all. It was just a gift from Magadi's, and that truth stung him. He stared at Helen, mulling over the nickname on her lips. Then Iso grinned like he'd earned it, proudly announcing that both swords were finally ready. Helen was ready to test them on the spot, but Ezo cut her off fast, said it was already late so they'd do it tomorrow instead, and the moment his words hit, Helen's eyes went wide in shock. Izo blurted out that she was sorry she made them wait. She still had to make it to tomorrow, and the girl protested for a second, then had to swallow it and agree. With that, everyone finally stopped pushing and decided to rest, and Izo took charge, set the table, and called everyone to dinner. Samia gushed that it was wonderful, while Isle just stumbled out an awkward, "You're exaggerating." Helen leaned in and asked, "Is it the raspberry you picked yesterday?" And the poor girl had no clue she was about to get used like this. Reich said her parents barely ever do it, and Ezel chimed in that he just wrapped his first custom job, so yeah, they're celebrating tonight. Samia totally got where he was coming from and cheered him on, and Reich backed it up by congratulating Iso too. Then that guy thanked the girls, making it clear they'd been a huge part of getting his work done. Helen lit up as she congratulated them, too. Iso even chimed in that she was the one who placed the order, so everyone should thank her as well. Helen just smiled. Then the man snapped that it was time to eat before the food went cold. The next day, Helen stared at the sword and grinned, swearing it fit her hand perfectly. She'd been too pumped to sleep a wink last night, and Iso told her to go ahead and test the blades. Helen spun her blade with razor-sharp precision, blasting through technique after technique like it was second nature. Every swing elegant, every move deadly graceful. The guys burst into smiles, and Helen let out a soft sigh before saying it was totally fine. Then she dropped the swords to the ground and sprinted off, leaving Iso stunned. The girl squeezed him in a tight hug and practically beamed, saying she was so happy she'd finally asked him about it. Iso nodded and said it felt good, like he was relieved. Then the very next second he shrieked that her grip was crushing him, coughing hard as pain shot through his body, insisting he'd tested her strength, and promising he'll fix everything if anything goes wrong. She just needs to head to Camillo's or straight here. Helen nodded, but the conversation snapped right to money. Izo said she'd cover whatever amount she wanted. The panicked girl blurted that she had no clue about market prices, and Iso calmly said he'd be fine with whatever price she was willing to pay for the order. She looked completely lost. Then the girl slid over Iso 2 gold and 1 silver, and Iso snapped the deal up. Helen didn't know if she'd just paid a fair price or if she'd overdone it. She forked over a bit more than last time, but the doubt still nagged at her. Iso assured her the original swords were top-notch, and he didn't care one bit. Then boom, they shook hands. Helen left, then Ezo grinned and said her grip was rock solid. Samia shot back that she and Rake had poured every ounce of strength into saving him, that the girl was screeching at the top of her lungs, and then Ezo just laughed. They were about to slip back into normal life. Reich just made sure they were fully stocked with long swords and blades, and then 2 days later it struck, a brutal collision with a natural threat. Samia slips straight to the main character and ducks into the building to deliver her news, and Iso instantly clocks that she came back way too fast, so something's definitely gone down. Then the girl blurts that a black bear has shown up and the hero snaps, "Are you hurt?" Samia says she bolted the second she saw him. Then she adds that the bear might have tracked her down by smell, because that thing has an amazing nose, while the hero lets out a breath of relief, sure everything's fine, and starts thinking about what to do next. He clocks that the bear is creeping right in, and that on the sprint to the city the guys could run straight into it. Then the truth hits hard. If Samia or Reich get attacked, they probably won't make it. Then Azo decides he's done keeping it to himself. He steps out for a moment and tells the others, yanks the spear he forged earlier, and Samia's eyes go wide as he turns around and marches off to take down the bear. The hero orders the girl to lock up the workshop in the house while he's away, but before he can even leave, Samia blurts out that she wants to go too. He snaps back right away, fighting his own worry and saying he isn't sure he can protect her. Then the hero admits he knows a bit about this, tells the girl not to assume he's doubting her archery, and decides they should let him handle everything on his own. After his brawl with Helen, Izo realizes his body started moving on its own, and even though he dodged the bear, he figures he can handle it. Then the girl looks him dead in the eye and orders him back alive. Right then Reich pushes for one thing, come back safe and sound, and the hero snaps back that he won't let his family die, so he promises without hesitation that he'll return. Then Izu storms out of the house and dives into the woods, while the girls lock up behind him and spiral with worry. Samia watches Reich fold his hands and start praying, and she swallows her panic to do the same. The hero pushes on down the road, but the skies sour fast. Wind howls, rain slashes, and Iso keeps charging toward a place that reeks of danger. He normally pawns all the danger searching off to Samia, but if this is a threat as big as a monstrous black bear, even Ezo's cheat sense starts twitching with pure anxiety. Rain drowns out every smell and every sound, so the hero figures he might actually have a shot, because that beast will struggle to track him down. Then Izo suddenly remembers something and flashes a grin. He still remembers the last world, how he threw away his life to save a cat, and now he's staring at a bear ready to kill it. Sure, Iso's body is different, but the soul that once sacrificed itself for that cat hasn't changed. But now everything feels different, because the hero isn't alone anymore. He has someone who needs protecting, and right at this moment, Samia and Right slam back into his memory. Iso remembers how, in a past life, he was dead lonely, grinding his heart out for a black campaign with nothing to show for it, yet now he's got a family and friends who actually value what he creates. Then the hero whips around and snaps at him to pull himself together. Right then and there, he stumbles into a showdown with a black bear. Izo braces, plants his feet, and thrusts his spear forward. A bear creeps closer and pops up on its back legs, towering over him, then unleashes a furious growl. Right then the hero realizes a monster of an opponent is standing in his way. Then Iso throws out a quick apology, swears he's got nothing personal, and right after that, bam, the beast charges in like a missile, and the hero realizes the bear may be massive, but it's shockingly fast. If that beast even brushes him a little, this hit could end it all, so Izo darts aside, slips the attack, and drives his spear into the bear, but after a beat, he realizes his strike barely phased it, and terror hits him hard. The bear shrieks in agony and goes full berserk. Then the hero starts to back off a bit, but a brutal hit lands out of nowhere, knocks him off balance, and sends him flying back before he can even raise a guard. Iso rockets into a tree trunk and smashes his back, rage exploding in him. Then he snaps, "No, I'm not dying." The hero pledges to guard his brand new life, this brand new world. He's set on guarding the daily rhythm he and his family fought to build. Then Iso barrels at the bear and slams back, roaring so hard the whole place shakes, yet the hero won't quit. He stares into the life he wants in this world, then drives a spear straight into the beast's head, boom, until the hero strides in and declares victory as the bear's lifeless body crashes to the ground. Edzo spots that the beast has stopped moving and won't breathe anymore, so he figures it's finally dead. Then he storms up to the body and grabs his spear. The hero figures Samia might have been right about his weapon being too sharp and uncomfortable, and then he drops to the ground to catch his breath. He wraps it up by admitting he took his life for the first time, and the moment it hits, he realizes he's so rattled he starts trembling. Even with priority mode on, this fight is brutal for the hero. Iso spots fresh bruises and nasty scrapes all over him, praying his bones are still intact. Then he can't help but wonder, what on earth is he supposed to do with the bear? The hero decides the life he stole should be devoured and buried, but before that, he has to haul the beast's body home, and Iso isn't sure he can pull it off. Rain won't let up, and the hero grimly hauls the huge beast's body on his back, one painful step at a time. Even Iso has to admit that no matter how strong he is, that bear is still brutally heavy. Then the hero spots the rain easing off little by little, and hope sparks in his chest, because if he can just reach the spot where wolves or somebody worse come for him, he might still make it. From where he stands, he's only managed to cover half the journey at best. Iso pauses and scans the area, then snaps his head when rustling erupts beside him. A figure rockets in, slams him to the ground, and as Iso hits the floor, he clutches his leg and yanks him straight in. After a while, the hero finally spots the girl, furious for reasons he can't quite place yet, and when he sees Samia snarling at the bear with her teeth bared, he rushes in to tell her the beast is already dead, begging her to calm down. The moment she hears it, her expression snaps into shock and she quickly pulls back from the hero, staring anxiously as she demands, "Are you okay?" He groans that everything hurts, but his bones are still intact, no major damage. Iso shoots the girl a quick look and smirks, and right when Samia freezes, the next second hits, tears burst forth and spill down her cheeks. Right away, the girl erupts into sobs and screams that she's so relieved the hero is still alive. Then Iso freezes in confusion, until Samia barrels into his arms, dragging him straight back into her hysterical panic. The hero starts soothing her right away, stroking her head and promising, "It's okay, everything's fine now," and just as the tension eases, a rustle snaps his attention behind him. He whirls around to find another girl, who immediately blurts that she hopes she didn't disturb them. Iso clocked her instantly as Reich and said she never tried to mess with them. Then the girl crashed her face into his chest, and he yelped in shock because that bruise on the hero's chest still burned with pain. Rick says that Samia noticed that the hero was delayed, after which she rushed to meet him. The girl could not leave her alone, and therefore decided to go with her. The hero scowls at how risky this could be, but Reich grins and says she can't send Samia out on her own, then adds that Iso and the black bear's scents got all tangled up. Next, the girl plants a brutal ambush, convinced something awful just went down. Right after that, the hero and the bear stepped into view like they'd fused into one, and the girl immediately lost it, panicking hard. Iso instantly understood Samia's reaction, because in his mind he could see just how terrifying it looked. He blurts out his gratitude, but Reich snaps back that he should thank Samia instead, so the hero turns to the girl and thanks her for worrying, and you can practically feel her tension melt away until she finally settles down. Iso tries to slip away from her, but Samia's latched onto him so hard he can't shake her off, and that's exactly what Beastman power really looks like. Then the hero lets out a heavy sigh and tells the girls to head home, and they agree right away. After that, he coaxes Samia into calming down, and the guys team up to carry the bear's body home. But when they lowered it into the lake, they called it for tonight and promised to come back tomorrow. When they finally got home, the hero started to slump and the girls panicked. Then Reich jumped in to cook dinner, while Azo kicked back and chilled in the room. The hero rips off his shirt and starts writhing in agony, and that freaks Samia out all over again, until Iso steps in and swears it's all fine. Then tears spill into the girl's eyes and she blurts out, "Is everything really okay with you?" The hero answers and then, like it hurts to say, adds that he has to get himself together. Then it hits him, sleepiness crashes in and he's at his limit, so SO tells the girl to call him when the bathroom's ready, and right then, his eyes shut on their own. The hero dozes off and slumps into the girl, pressing right into her chest. Then Swami's world flips into confusion, and panic kicks in fast. Then she notices Iso's already passed out asleep, and her panic finally melts away, so she slides in, gently strokes his head, and coaxes him back with warm praise for making it home. After a while, Isaac jolts awake and realizes he's sprawled on something soft, then horror hits. He remembers he never got to wash up, rockets to his feet, and the next second he's back in bed, already dressed. The hero whips his head around, and there, right beside him, stands Samia. She erupts into a scream, and the shock hits him hard. Iso quickly decides to wish her a good morning, and Samia snaps right back with the same greeting. He finally figures it out, fatigue knocked him out, and Samia nods like, "Yep, that's it." Then she stumbles through an awkward warning. Reich said if the hero isn't dressed up, that nasty air will crawl into his body. So they teamed up, tossed Iso onto the bed, and just as they did, Reich herself stormed into the room, only to see the hero already awake. He nods, tells her he's sorry they dragged her into this mess with him, but she shrugs it off and hands him the clothes she just washed. Then she blurts that Samia suggested it herself, until the moment her mouth snaps shut and she demands, "Shut up." The girl begs them not to say it, then Reich brushes it off and says everything's fine. The hero's thrown for a loop, and he immediately clocks that Samia is painfully shy. Right now, the girl tries to sneak the other out of the room by saying they're going to cook breakfast. Then the hero starts stripping down and changing into his clothes. He thinks a brand new day is supposed to feel normal, so the guys head outside to the lake, grab the bear's body, haul it home, then start carving it up and stuffing it with vegetables. Then they start frying Baramat, and Samia, who's never tasted it before, leans in and asks the hero if it's actually delicious, while he nods at his own assumption and spots that the sizzling fried baramat already looks downright irresistible. The recap slams right into the moment the hero suddenly realizes no bathroom at all in their house, and right then Samia and Reich fire up the boiling water, wipe themselves down, and scrub their hair in a bucket. Izo skips the fancy routine and just dives straight into the lake every day for his water intake. It hits like pure refreshment, so the hero says the girls haven't complained once, yet he's still sitting there, tense with worry. While Reich and Izo busts out the chores, Samia storms back home and tells her everything, then cheers her on, turns around, and freezes in pure shock. The hero spots a grime-covered girl clutching loot and demands to know what happened. She snaps back that the place where they slaughtered the animal in her hands turned filthy after the last rain, and that's how she ended up a little dirty too. Izo spots the dirt smeared all over her and says rubbing with a rag won't do a thing. Rick nods right along. Then Izo goes, fine, forget the fuss, let's toss her in the lake and wash it all off. Samia suddenly demands the exact opposite, swearing she'll clean herself the moment she dries. Then the hero cuts in, warning that the bed linen will still get stained, and she shrieks that it'll be fine, but he insists, no, not like that. What? Then the hero spots dirt in her hair too, and Samia loses it, screaming that she's refusing to swim in the lake. That's when Reik cuts in, saying she wants in too if Samia is actually going to get in. That snaps the girl into a stunned freeze. Reik tells her she hasn't been out in ages because walking alone is straight up dangerous. She still insists she'll be totally fine with Samia at her side, then she starts to fight back. But nobody listens to her, so Reich steps in and tells the hero they're done here, waving them off with a grin, thrilled they still managed to get Samia to swim. The girls rush to the lake and jump right in, and Reich blurts out how insanely refreshing the water feels, while Samia fights back against those rising feelings. The girl clocks it and blurts, "Do you really hate water?" She answers, "I can't stand it." Then Samia says she still plunges into the water to soak her catch, but in moments like this, she throws herself in head first. She admits she's not used to washing, but Reich's still stunned. Her hair and fur always look perfect. Samia then reveals she baby steps every detail, carefully caring for them and wiping down her body with steady precision. Reich can't believe it. She's always flawless with barely any care, and she even calls it cool. Hearing that, Samia blushes and shoots back that she's always neat too. Rick blurts that the workshop stays brutally hot and sticky, so she slips into a swim whenever she can. Then she adds that she can't make it here solo, so today she's bringing Samia along. She thanks her for everything, then the girl asks, "Just tell me if you'll come here." Samia shoots back, "If that's what you want, I'll take you away." Right then, Reich strides up to wash her hair, and she erupts in a scream that he doesn't need to. The girl insists she's been taking care of the younger ones and told Samia not to worry, but it doesn't calm a thing. In the end, Reich finally gets his way and eases the girl into the shallow water. Then she starts brushing her wet hair and humming that same tune, and just like that, Samia feels her panic melt into calm. Even though she can barely recall her childhood, it sparks that same old feeling she used to chase as a kid, so she shuts her eyes and lets the moment hit her. After a while, they finally stumble back home, and the hero erupts in joy at their return. A happy Reich calls out that they're home, and right behind her, a satisfied Sakamiya just stands there, smiling. Izo asks if they're cold, and one of the girls grins and says the campfire warmed them up, so he clocks it, then declares that dinner's ready, sending their happiness through the roof. Then the hero steps in to help the girls dry their hair, blasting wind magic like a secret move. He calls it the hand-drying technique. After a bit, the guys finally reach the house, and Samia gets hit with a tough question. How do you hold a spoon the right way? The hero calls her out, and right away the girl realizes she's been grabbing the cutlery all wrong. Samuel blurts that she can't do it because ISO just doesn't hold the spoon the way she does, and when the hero hears her talking about a spoon, he's thrown off like, why does she care so much? She clocks the way he handles the cutlery so smoothly, then tells him she figured eating like him would be awesome, and now she wants to copy him, even if it's going to be a tough challenge. Wright suddenly steps up and tells her, "I can teach you, let's practice together," and when she agrees, she has the girl open her hand first and grip the spoon between her thumb and forefinger. Right now, the hero just watches with a grin, mulling over how Wright's got a huge family, and that makes her an awesome teacher. Only at first, Iso didn't even clock any of it. The girl tells Samia to hold up her middle finger, and the hero instantly believes Reich is about to teach them an insane amount. After a while, the girl finally learns how to grip the spoon the right way, and the guys explode into applause. Then dinner kicks off, and the hero sets a plate of today's usual soup on the table. Samia drops into her seat, grabs the spoon, and goes for the first bite. Then her face hardens, and 1 second later she explodes into a scream. It's insanely tasty. The girl tells Iso that today's soup tastes better than ever, and he clocks that her reaction feels totally normal, until he blurts out the truth. Food hits different when you're happy. Then the guys finally dig into their food, and Reich realizes the soup tastes way better now, so the hero nods along, saying it doesn't feel the same anymore, and then it hits him. They're slowly turning into a real family. The girl told her brother she wanted to slip into the Black Forest because a blacksmith lived there, so he handed her a letter and ordered her to deliver it to a merchant who knew exactly where that blacksmith was. Then the tale shifts straight to Camillo's shop, where the man tells our hero his goods will sell just fine until he suddenly jolts back to it. Wait, Guardian Marius is back in the capital, he blurts, following the rumors, and demands to know what's going on. Then the hero thanks him for the help, and Camillo leans in, saying something's gone wrong in the capital, like the Guardian came all the way here for that very reason. Then the guy blurts that it's best Ezo doesn't know anything too deep, and he shrugs off the whole cost, figuring the info was free since they never told him the price. After that, the crew wheels the cart and rolls out. Right then, a girl bursts into a sprint toward them, but the hero spots the pursuers blocking their path and realizes he's going to get caught before they even get a chance. Samia spots them too. Azu immediately calls them bandits, but she shuts him down, saying it looks like a real fight is about to break out, so Azu tells her to slip off and scout what's going on. The girl bolts into a run, and the hero yells that they'll catch up to her fast. Then he and Reich decide to move. Iso yanks the cart and sprints after Samia, but soon he spots two girls battling in the distance, and when the hero finally pulls out a weapon, he decides to walk away from Rick. He barrels into the chaos, demands to know what's happening, and then takes down one brutal bandit, only for that to spark the next thug's rage, rushing at the hero until Samia catches him with a warning. With one brutal strike, the hero shatters the enemy's weapon and drops him, then snaps his focus to the last guy. The girl drives an arrow into him, and the hero growls that no one else remains. Then he whips his gaze toward the unknown girl and asks if she's hurt. Then the hero leans in and demands she spill the truth why she was attacked, because they've got to answer for the massacre of bandits, and when he sees her face it hits him. He knows her somehow, but who is she? The girl grabs their attention, thanks them for helping, and introduces herself, Diana Amour, then explains she had to leave the capital for a bit, but just as she was traveling, pursuers ambushed her. Ezo hears her name and instantly knows she's tied to the metropolitan aristocracy, and that she's telling the truth, so now he has to decide what to do next. The hero swears the guards will come, tells the girl to hide, and she says yes, because buying time might save them. Then he guesses Diana will go straight to that person, and of course, he's dead on. Iso darts into the forest and tells Rick to handle the cart, then turns to Samia, begs her for forgiveness, and Samia flashes back, "It's all good, no worries." The hero finally gets it. Today's the first time he's used his weapon the way it was meant to be used, and now he's locked in, ready to protect his family no matter what. That's why Izo doesn't feel even a shred of guilt for what he did. Samia clocks it when he lowers himself onto the guy's body and demands answers, but the hero brushes it off and says nothing special even happened. Then the guys call it a night and head home, but Ezio grabs Diana first and demands she tell him all about the man she's setting out to find. The girl says this man just moved into a remote place, and she adds that her older brother was the one who told her all about it. Then she blurts out that this guy is a blacksmith too, and that hits the hero like a wave of shock for a split second. The girl says her brother wants him to fix his weapon, the very one the blacksmith originally made. Then the hero suddenly clicks, he remembers that person, and when he realizes it's her older brother, he's not even shocked that Diana's face feels so familiar. Ezo whispers, asking if her brother's name is Marius, and she can't shake the shock of how he knows it, because right then the hero clicks in, it's still all about him. Then she finally blurts out to Diana that she's exactly the girl her brother was talking about, and Diana's stunned speechless, because who could possibly believe something that wild? The guys finally head home, and Esso blurts out that Diana got a letter from Marius to Camillo. She was meant to meet a mysterious man who'd take her straight to the hero. Then it hits him this girl's brother is seriously weird, because he's willing to hand his sister off to some old man in a terrifying place, and before he can even process it, Diana barges in and demands the guys tell her their names. The hero introduces himself, then proudly brings her into his family's orbit, telling her he thinks they've snagged a little time and offering Diana a place to stay, because the guards will catch up to them otherwise, and the girl nods in agreement. Right when the hero gets there, they drop the luggage and fire up the stove. Thanks to Sami keeping watch, nobody has to fear harassment. Ezo ushers the girl into the bedroom, and sure, it doesn't match his high status at all, but she takes it in stride, completely normal, like it's no big deal, and dinner time is almost here. Diana practically beams at the food, and the hero gestures for her to sit and taste it. When she takes one bite and erupts, it's amazing, and the guys exchange shocked looks. Then she blurts out that she's just starving, but ISO snaps back that enjoying food is what helps you power through the hardest times, After that, Diana can finally breathe out and thanks everyone for accepting her. The hero's been fighting to earn her trust, determined to do right by her, and then, right after they finish the meal, he finally pushes forward, begging her to tell him the real reason she left the city. Azo tells them this is the key to hiding Diana for good, and right then Diana finally lets her guard down, trusting him enough to spill the truth about her family. Diana starts spilling about her father, Count Ammer, the guy who rules the entire territory, even Camillo, and then she drops the rest. She's got 2 brothers, Leon and Carol, and the whole family only has 4 kids between them. At first, Leon was slated to become the heir, but the tides turned fast. Then he rides out with his father to smash a whole horde of demons guarding the border. But tragedy struck, their army crumbled, and the Count and his men were wiped out. Marius returned to the capital with the awful news, and during his investigation, he stumbled on one chilling moment that didn't add up. The girl remembers being warned that the army got smashed by a terrifying monster, but there's zero proof, and the wounds on the Count and the heir don't match claws or fangs at all. Diana insists those are the real cuts, then her mind snaps to who would gain from her father and brother's deaths. She points the finger at her second brother, Carol. The hero demands the truth, and the girl blurts out that Carol isn't the rightful heir, he's the concubine's son, so the family throne inheritance lands on Marius, the son of the hero's real wife. Then she drops the heartbreaking bomb. Carol's mother died right after his birth, and Marius's mother took pity on him, so Carol was raised side by side with his brothers and sisters, treated just as fairly as the rest. The girl blurts out that she didn't even know any of this existed until that incident, and the hero snaps that if they don't settle the inheritance mess soon, the missing accounts will strip him of his title. He snaps to the truth time is running out, yet all he gets from the girl is deadly silence, and it hits him. The person who went after Diana is her own brother. Then it hits him Marius isn't just some ordinary soldier at all, he's the Count's son, and right then the hero blurts out that he's finally sure. The girl needs to stick close to him for a while. That leaves Diana squirming with embarrassment, and the other girls burst into cheers, especially once Ezo tells them to reach out to her for literally any question. Diana admits she's thrilled to team up with them, then bam, the hero pivots and starts pushing for conversion, refusing to sound stiff, so he urges everyone to drop the formal talk and just communicate casually. The girl nods along and even calls ISO out in a whole new way. Then, just like that, the guys erupt in joy when a fresh face steps into their crew. A fresh new day rolls in, and the hero realizes something's off. This normal, routine feels different from the moment he wakes up, and he remembers how the girls have been helping Diana with the household chores all day long. After a while, Izo finally snaps into gear and heads to work, and Diana slips into the workshop right after him. She switches into workflow mode, beams and says she's excited to cooperate with them. Then Izo turns to Samia and asks her to lend a hand. As the hero studies the girl's work, he realizes she still remembers everything he taught her, and a proud smile bursts onto his face. Then he clocks that Diana is insanely strong, even for a noble woman. Then Reich tells me she saw her swinging a sword yesterday, so she figures she's seriously skilled. Evening is creeping closer, and the guys decide they've still got plenty to get done before the day ends. Iso cheers the girl for surviving her first day at work, and then bam, she spots it. Their swords are made with totally different levels of quality. The hero claims the long sword is the standard model, but the short blade is the fancy, luxurious one. Then Diana asks to take a look, and he doesn't refuse, only warns her the handle isn't finished yet. Then the girl snatches up a sword, and right when she does, her eyes flare with sudden light. The hero freezes, remembering Reich's exact same move from the very beginning, and then Diana erupts, screaming that it's unbelievable. Suddenly, Reich steps up to her and notices the same shock on her face when she first saw those swords up close. Then she turns to me and says only a handful of blacksmiths in the capital can even pull off work like this. Then he stops and asks himself, does he even know what blacksmith levels look like in this world? Fancy high-end gear and plain low-tier stuff are everywhere, so if the hero's selling high-end swords, he won't exactly feel like a rare standout. Diana snaps her head toward Izo and fires a question, can he train with her? It floors him, but she repeats it, no backing down, and then it hits. Diana isn't just a girl in the spotlight, she's a fighter too. The girl admits she's probably not going to beat ISO this time, but she still wants one thing, seeing it again. Then the hero clocks it instantly. She's talking about the moment he saved her, and he realizes there's literally no other entertainment in this place. Then he tells her he can only do this for her once, because darkness is coming fast, and she starts to thank him right away. After that, it hits him that Diana isn't like any ordinary girl. The guys spill outside, and the hero spots her grinning with the sword like she's actually happy, because he didn't hand her top-quality blades for safety. While the other girls traded rumors that ISO is stronger than it looks, because everyone forgets how brutal blacksmiths really are, he couldn't help thinking they were blowing it way out of proportion. Diana finally drops into a fighting stance, and the hero tells her to strike the moment she's ready, so she nods, steels herself, and charges in, stabbing him over and over with her sword. The hero manages to fend them off, but in the chaos he spots it. Every single one of her moves lands with surgical precision. He realizes she's leagues beyond a normal swordsman, even if she still isn't quite as deadly as Helen. Right then, Simeon clocks that Aizu's suddenly gone deadly serious, so he blasts through her guard, swaps blades in the blink of an eye, and shoves her straight into a terrifying opening. Then he slips the sword away, claims he's one of them, and Diana nods along, gasping as she tries to catch her breath, while the hero slumps on his feet from pure exhaustion, admitting this kind of physical grind is something he's just not used to. Suddenly the girl blurts out, "So you didn't go all out?" And he answers, "Yeah, because we're not fighting to the death." Then she swallows hard and admits, "Even if it's at the same time, I still can't match you." The hero blurts out that she's doing great, then she realizes people are calling her the Rose of the Arena, right as he insists she's only doing well, like it's just the beginning. Samia barges into the conversation and drops the bomb. There's nothing anyone can do, and even if she fought Aizu 100 times over, she still wouldn't beat him. That hits him with a jolt of confusion. The girl asks if not even a beastman can beat the hero, and she backs up her suspicion. Then Rick chimes in, bragging that he's so strong he fought Helen and walked away totally uninjured. Right now, the hero finally realizes Helen was holding back on him, and he can't stop wondering if priority mode still isn't enough for self-defense, because the air is getting hotter by the second. Diana snaps back to it. Helen calls herself the lightning sword, and the hero nods like it's obvious. Then Diana presses, "So you really stood up to her," and the hero admits he lasted about 15 minutes. The girl shrieks that it's been ages, then tells them why she's called the lightning sword. Helen earned that name for the freaky speed of her sword possession, and that's what shot her into fame with the nobles. Then the hero finally gets it. She's terrifyingly strong, and he can't wrap his head around how he even lived, while the girl decides he didn't just forge swords for Helen, he also fought side by side with her in battle. Right in the middle of it, she shuts up and Izo blurts, "Let's head back inside," but then Diana drops to her knees in front of him, lowers her sword to the floor, and begs the hero to teach her, so hard it knocks the wind out of him. Then he shoots the girls an evil glare for praising him so hard, and you can see them shrink in embarrassment. Right then, the hero realizes that Marius's precious sister, Mistress Diana, the one he was entrusted with, has just dropped to her knees before him. Suddenly he spots the girl's pose and realizes Dogajaza is still in play, so he nods, ready to go along with it, as long as she's willing to stay and study after work. Then he leans in and admits he isn't properly trained in sword fighting, so he can't teach her well at all. She'll just have to watch and learn through practice, and after that, the girl starts thanking him. Then she bursts into joy and the other girls rush in to congratulate her. Seeing that, the hero figures she's the prankster type at home, and he can't help but feel for Marius, convinced he must have had it rough. Then he went up to Diana and told her to call him master and not fear him, and just like that she agreed. Today, the hero even gained a second student, though she wasn't a blacksmith. And to top it off, the daily grind got one more twist. From that moment on, Diana threw herself into the workshop work to help non-stop, and every evening, the guys went at it with the wooden swords they'd built for training. The tale cuts to the courtyard where the girls who helped the hero with his work spot him. He started training Diana, and when they see her move, they realize she's already razor-sharp with sword fighting, honed and ready for battle. Iso swears this is the best move he can make for her. By pushing her into this kind of competition, he'll help her grow and get better. He says it's his way of putting blacksmithing to use, because he can't just teach the girls anything on his own. So they can forge their own foundation and charge ahead, right as the hero starts believing he can be useful to them. The story kicks off the second Diana bolts away from danger. She's fleeing someone full speed, until a brutal arrow slices through the air and pins her attention, nearly slamming her legs. Samia's spot in the tree makes her skid to a stop and crane her neck up. Then, after the guys finally make it back home, the hero clocks what's going on. Just as he's about to congratulate them for coming back, he suddenly freezes in shock. Right beside him, in high spirits, he spots a worn-out Diana and asks what happened, and she lets out that she's absolutely wiped. Samia blurts out that she begged her to become a beater, and the hero suddenly clicks. Diana had to stalk the prey, push it right into the archer's sights. Then Diana leans in and admits hunting here is nothing like hunting back in the capital. Samia beams and boasts that she brought down a massive deer with it, and the hero immediately clocks that Diana had to sprint her heart out, so he shuts training down on the spot and lets everyone rest. The girl nods and says this is the best move for his condition, and before he can even react, Ezo offers to handle tomorrow's deer, and the girls team up and take it down together. Then Diana grins, saying she can't wait, and that honestly throws him for a loop. The next day, the guys head into the forest, slash into the prey, and start the whole slaughter right there, while Diana finally realizes how meat is actually taken, because before this, the only meat she'd ever known was the stuff sitting on a plate. Just then the hero steps into her place. He'd already figured this out. Then he spots that she stays calm, even though she's still so young. But the moment the girl realizes the deer was alive not long ago, sadness hits her hard. Then the hero blurts out, "This is how the meat we eat reaches us. This is what life really is." And the girl immediately freezes when she realizes he looks exactly like her grandfather. Reich suddenly fires back, asking if this isn't just a northern way of thinking. Then the hero shrugs and says he can't speak for anywhere else, before explaining that back home, they taught him that everything has a soul. Samia squints and says it looks like beastmen, and Diana fires back that the whole forest might have a soul. Then the hero lanes in and hits them with it. Even the grass here is alive, and so are the wind, the earth, the sun, and even the fire they're using. Then he drops this piece of wisdom: if you're going to live with them, you'd better be grateful, like his grandpa always said. The girl sits with his words, thinking hard. ISO explains that's why when they sit down to eat, they press their hands together, showing thanks for nature's life and generosity, and giving respect to the chefs too, and Diana clocks that it looks like a prayer while the hero nods, agreeing with her. Suddenly Samia blurts out, "Let's do what we did at ISO's place," and Reich immediately backs her up. Then the girl spots that the hero pulls the same move from time to time, and he's oddly caught off guard, like it just happens without him even realizing it. Then he decides to team up, points out they should head home, and start cooking lunch together. When they finally got home, the guys chopped the meat into bite-sized pieces and started frying it up. Then the hero laid the food on plates, checked that everyone was seated, and told them to fold their hands, so they all sat down, folded their hands, and waited. The tale cuts to the Eimer family's home. Moria drops into a chair, and the moment he sits, he can't stop spiraling over his brother, Carol, and the dangerous situation that's got him terrified. He thought his brother would step in and lead the family after their father and brother's funeral, but when the truth hit, it was dead-on impossible, and Carol erupted in fury, barely holding himself back from going too far. Marius remembers it vividly, and admits it was the first time he'd ever seen him like that. Right after Carol left home, he snapped and spoke out against the succession, and from that moment on, everything went horribly wrong. Marius started uncovering a stash of fake documents that were meant to wreck his name, and then the assassination attempts kept coming, but none of it truly slowed him down, because he could rip the lies apart and prove his innocence. The whole mess started when he dragged Diana into it, and now he couldn't let him keep tearing things up, especially after that recent incident. To end this whole conflict, Marius pins everything on one person, yet the dread still gnaws at him. Will they truly stand up and handle it? Then the story snaps right back to our hero. He peeks from behind the bushes, breath held, convinced the coast is clear. Then he slips downstairs and snatches the thing he came for. A few days have passed since Diana finally arrived. Eza dashed into the city to sell his goods, then rewrote Camillo's letter from scratch and spelled out the whole mess to him, and after that, they locked in a plan for their next move. Turns out Camillo already knew exactly what was going on. He even said he didn't want to drag the hero into it, but the second Diana is handed to him, he's pulled into the mess without even trying. Camillo shoots a grin, and yeah, you can't argue with that. Then the hero remembers everyone keeps saying he owes Marius for what's happened, so he decides to do whatever it takes to find a good blacksmith because he wants to help. Iso still remembers that, and now he's tying it all together. He's already spotted a hidden spot in the forest, close to the road, where they can trade letters in secret. Then he reaches out to Marius, and now a letter from him has finally landed in his hands. The hero rips open the letter and freezes in shock at what he finds inside. Marius tells him to get every single thing ready for work, because tomorrow they're hitting the capital together. When he finally gets home, he spills the news to the rest of the guys. Izo's telling everyone he's headed for the capital tomorrow, while the three girls stay put at home. Then Reich snaps, "What do we do with the forge?" And the hero tells them, "Keep going." He remembers she already knows how to start it, and she grins she'll be fine because she's bringing Bello straight from the warehouse. Izo then blurts that plenty of food is already set aside so the girls won't go hungry, and Samia swears he'll hunt if it ever comes to that. Then the hero finally clicks. He's not alone because he's got people who have got his back. Suddenly the girl rushes to apologize for pulling him into this, but he shuts her down, saying it's all good because the hero owes her brother anyway. Ezo just tells Diana to treat it like repayment, and she agrees on the spot. Then the hero calls it that's enough news for today, because more work is waiting, and the other girls nod along right there with him. Night fades away and a brand new day storms in. He ducks behind a tree, stalking for whoever's out there, and the moment he hears wheels crunching near, his instincts scream, They're here for me, so he peeks out. He's ordered to get into the cart faster, and ISO lunges into action. Then the man hits him with the real plan. He'll have to climb into the box because the hero can't be seen, and even as he nods along, doubt starts crawling in that he won't actually fit. But when Ezo yanks open the box, he spots it strapped right onto the cart, so there's way more room than he'd thought. He flashes a grin and mutters, "I get it." The man just laughs and calls it a merchant's old trick. The hero scrambles into the box and instantly realizes he's wedged in there like sardines, cramped, suffocating, miserable. Then, after what feels like forever, the cart finally rolls into the city, and that's when Izo manages to wake up. He figures they must have rolled in while he was knocked out, because the moment it started getting loud outside, the hero catches the chatter, they missed the last wagon, and immediately orders the driver to take the next one. Izo realizes they've finally hit the checkpoint leading to the capital, and panic starts to crawl up their spine. The guard straight up decides the cart must belong to a merchant, and the merchant just smirks, confirming every guess as he reveals he's hauling goods to sell. Then the guardian demands to inspect the goods, and the man and the hero go rigid with terror, sure they'll get caught, yet the guardian spots nothing weird and waves them through. Then the hero lets out a shaky breath of relief, because he realizes they've already ripped miles away from the checkpoint, only to find his whole body gone numb. SO is sure his old body won't survive, until a signal slams in and tells him he can finally get out. He yanks the drawer lid open, starts stretching, and blurts that his whole body went numb. The merchant tells him, "I get how brutal that was," and just like that, boom, the hero's mind snaps to one terrifying question: where are they now? He starts sweeping the room with his eyes, convinced it's a blacksmith shop, and then boom, someone answers his question. This is the Ammer family blacksmith shop. The hero whips around, shocked, and realizes it's Marius standing there. Now he spots the man in a totally different guise, and bam, he's sure this guy is a true aristocrat. Marius tells him that right here, they forge and repair the weapons used by soldiers. The man hauls the cart off and snatches the horses away. Then the guys are left alone, and Marius finally clocks him. It's been forever, and Marius nods, remembering their last run-in when he forged that short sword for him. Then the guy blurts out that the clock's ticking, so he keeps it short. Marius turns to the hero and begs for a sword, the very best one he can forge. The hero clocks that the guy wants a custom model, so he nods and asks what it's for. Then Marius drops the bomb. His family's sword, a priceless heirloom, was stolen just a few days ago. The guy fires off, asking if SO knows what's going down in the Ammer family right now, and SO says Diana filled him in. Then Marius snaps to a conclusion. Carol could have stolen the sword based on everything that's happening. The hero demands, "Why do you need me?" And the guy answers fast, saying his brother's claim is simple. The one who let the family heirloom get stolen doesn't deserve to lead the family. Marius thinks Carol will play along, scam the info, and hunt for the sword, and when the moment hits, he'll claim he found it, so he can prove he's actually worthy to be an heir. The hero demands answers, and Marius snaps back that there's no time to hunt for the real sword, so he pushes the plan. Act like the stolen blade is nothing but a fake. Then he blurts that he wants the hero to forge the Ammer family sword, and when the shock hits, he makes the guy slow down, demanding to know if that blade will truly become a family heirloom. Marius fires back that he got it all perfectly, so the hero can't help but wonder, is he really satisfied? Then it clicks, that relic sword wasn't hammered by elves or gods at all, it's just a plain old sword. He says that when their family was finally recognized by the king handed them that sword, and everyone whispers it was forged by the greatest blacksmith of the age. That's when Iso's mind starts racing. Out of nowhere, a man storms back into the room and tells everyone, "Helen showed me the sword the hero forged." Then he shakes his head and adds, "There are barely any other blacksmiths left in this world who could forge something like that." What? So he figures the hero will handle it. Then he spots the problem. He's never seen that sword before, and if he starts forging it, he's going to make something totally different from the original. Marius tells him not to fret because they almost never use those archives, and when they do, it's only for hush-hush private ceremonies. But then he spots the truth. The archives are full of his story, and not a single word is written about what he looks like. Marius convinces the hero there's nothing to worry about, then he finally swallows the truth and still agrees to take the order, so Marius erupts into relief, thanks Izo, and celebrates. But then the hero says, "You can talk to me informally too," and he tells Marius to speak to him the way he did earlier in the city, because he's not used to being treated like that. Then the guy shoots back that he can't help but respect the person who's going to save his family, and the hero tells him it's only because of him he even gets to do business in the city. So yeah, that's basically settling a debt. Mario leans in and tells them both to stop being so overly polite, then fires off, "You with me, hero?" And ISO immediately lights up and agrees, so the two of them nod along and settle on it together. The hero thinks the blacksmith should talk to the man who's headed for the title of count, but he figures this hits harder than endless politeness, so Marius pushes forward and heads back to the sword anyway. He tells them Carol should dig up their lies, because if she does, all they have to do is line up the fake sword against the real one and spot the difference. Then the guy smirks and drops the bombshell. If the hero's sword comes out stronger, everyone will instantly know which one the king actually granted, and that grin tells the hero exactly what the future count can do. He reminds me I already told you our time is razor thin. Then he leans in and asks the hero, "Can you start working right now?" And ISO just says, "Yes." It snaps his outfit into place and tells him the debt to Marius is payback time. Then the hero growls that no magic is used in the House of Amber Forge, so you've got to strike the fire yourself. And honestly, ISO's luck is that he's picked up the know-how from his own skills, so he's got the basics down cold and can tackle it without breaking a sweat. First step, grab the right chunk of iron and hammer it on the anvil. After a few dozen hard swings, the iron finally blazes red hot. Then you dunk it into the barley within the bark and light it on fire. Later, the hero hauls it straight to the furnace coals. He realizes these furs still have to be handled the old way, fed into the process to spark the fire. Then he checks the in-between results and thinks, so far everything's going my way. He usually powers everything with his magic mechs and a magic furnace, and that's how he's figured out the real reason her work gets done so fast. So now the hero grabs the finest iron he can find and starts forging it right away. For now, everything's been smooth sailing, until later when he starts forging again, and he suddenly realizes something's gone wrong, and ISO figures it's because he's using a different hammer, so he's thinking it might be time to ditch it and take his own. Then it hits him this is a custom model, and he snaps into focus, concentrates harder, shapes the sword with skill, and moves on to tempering it next. At last, the hero finishes polishing and sharpening the blade until it gleams. Then it's finally handed to him as a ready-made sword, but the moment ISO glances his way, he realizes it's nothing like the sword he had pictured. The tale shifts to the workshop where they're packed in, waiting on the master's return, while Samia can't stop replaying the hero's last words, right before he left, when the girl spun toward him and demanded he come back unharmed. He agreed with her and those words burned into Samia's memories. Then out of nowhere, someone calls out that the hero is totally fine. Samia snaps her head up, twists around, and boom, she realizes they were right. Then Samia yells that she isn't scared in the slightest, and Diana instantly realizes why, because Samia has every reason to be calm, especially with Diana feeling awful herself after dragging ISO into all of this. Suddenly, Samia erupts in a scream. She's not the one who's really hurting, it's Diana that she's more worried about, and she admits she gets why family matters for a girl, even if she's still struggling to fully grasp it. It leaves Diana feeling genuinely touched. Then the tale gets shoved to the forge, where our main character clocks in, burning with one question: why does the result change every single time? ISO realizes his job keeps dragging him into new worlds, but he never meant to forge a sword unlike any other. Then a man bursts into the room, eyes widening as he spots the hero already done. But when he glares at the sword with pure disgust, he can't help asking what happened and what's wrong. ISO snaps back that he's not done yet and turns away, only for his opponent to blurt out that, to him, everything looks absolutely perfect. The hero jams the sword down onto a bundle of several dozen harnesses, and it slices straight through them like they're nothing, no struggle at all. Then he erupts in a scream, awestruck by how razor-sharp it is. ISO swears that sword looks just as good as a top-tier model. Then he bolts to his bag, yanks something out, and when the man demands what it is, ISO grins and reveals it: a knife. Then he slams a knife at the same bundle of bundles, and chops through it with ease, leaving the man staring in shock, while the hero realizes this isn't the truth after all. Camillo blurts out his shock, because the incision made zero noise, but ISO just grins and says he always pulls out things like that with a cut so sharp it doesn't even sound. Then the man finally gets it, why the hero never follows the usual orders, because this job can't land in an amateur's hands, and right then, he pushes himself to forge a sword all over again. Camillo blurts, "Wait, what about the sword that's already been made?" And the hero snaps back, "You can take it," then smirks and adds, "I'll even give you a discount." Camillo's eyes widen, so ISO really is a legit blacksmith. After a while, the hero cranks out 2 more knives, matching the custom model's level, but they still come out worse than the high-quality blade. Then he grips both in his hands and freezes, staring like, wait, why are they different? The hero spots the knives he forged at home blazing brighter, like they're glowing from the inside. Then he's hit with the shock. When he doesn't pour his soul into the work, the shine vanishes. Then the question hits him like a punch. How is he supposed to recreate that same light with the scraps he has? And just like that, the hero realizes he can't pull it off after all. Then he hurls the knife straight into the fire, scorches it until it's red hot, and smashes it into jagged pieces. before wrapping every shard in a slick, damp linen cloth and burying it under a blanket of straw ashes. The hero scorches it all with fire, cools it down, then forges up a single ingot. If he's short on materials, he'll hammer the job with his knife instead, convinced that cramming everything into one hole will somehow make it work. They smash it with heat and cuts, fold it back in, hammer it down, then blast it with more fire. ISO repeats the whole grind 15 times because that's when the real work finally starts. With brute strength, he pushes his senses to the absolute edge, drilling out perfect strikes until he starts reshaping the sword's very form. And as he hammers the blade again and again, he realizes the metal no longer feels like it did at the very first hit. Then he snatches the sword, checks it over, bam, it's already finished, and grabs a chisel next, ready to carve a pattern into it so the sword can become a relic. Azo remembers what Mr. Marius told him. The first relic sword was the pride of the Eimer family founder, so this blade isn't just important, it's the key to their whole history. But the hero can't believe the guy would call this sword a fake, because this blade isn't just a sword, and he sure as hell doesn't think he has the right to trash the work. So ISO plunges into making a brand new sword, no worse than the one before. He knows he can't mess up the shape or let the strength drop, because their family's heirloom status hangs on every careful move. Once the hero finally tore his focus away from his work, he snapped to attention, only to realize he hadn't even noticed when the night had fallen, yet somehow he still finished forging the sword and decked it out with decorations. The hero tells you he tucked the emblem of a chubby cat into hiding where nobody could spot it. Then he wrapped the whole thing in leather, leaving you a sneaky little Easter egg. In the end, he finally calls it time to rest because there's no point pushing on today. The hero's done with his most important job, and he'll take on those knives tomorrow. The sword was finally done, and Marius couldn't help praising it as a beautiful masterpiece. Then Iso leaned in and grinned, saying the scabbard took him the whole evening, even though he pulled it off. Suddenly, the guy snaps into a fighting stance and charges in swinging his sword, while the hero and Camillo stare, blown away, and then the hero realizes with a jolt that he swings just like Diana. Maria blurts out that this is the best sword she's ever seen him grip, and the hero shoots back that his blades are always top tier. Then the guy snaps that you can't just brush this off as a fake. Marius throws out his thanks, tells him to rest until tomorrow, and the hero immediately figures out, all right, he's heading home tomorrow. Izo jolted awake that morning, started getting ready to leave, and then boom, Marius showed up, demanded he slip into his costume, and dragged him along like it was go time. Marky Menzel, whoever it is, pops the question, do they want the final verdict from him, since he just heard that Lord Carroll has come back with the stolen sword? Nahiro blurts that this guy runs the mansion, and he's tight with the late Count Ammer. Then Carroll suddenly snaps, he came back with the relic yesterday, right by the border. Then Marquis Menzel slams the decision down and declares Marius the heir, but Carroll snaps back, saying he doesn't deserve it after letting the relic get stolen. The hero clocks that the inevitable is finally starting, while the man shrugs that it all makes sense. Then bam, Marius bursts in and says the sword they found is a fake. Carroll's jaw drops and even the Marquis looks shaken. Then the guy yanks out yet another sword and claims he's holding the original, right in his hands. The man doesn't let it slide, he demands to know what he's trying to pull. Maria tells him that the documents his father left behind point straight to one thing. The Amor family constantly keeps spare swords on hand, using them for ceremonies and a whole lot more. He suddenly shoves the scroll into the Marquis, saying it proves the title goes to whoever comes with the real sword. Then he insists the handwriting is Amur's, and the hero is stunned by how ready that guy really was. Suddenly Camillo winks at Ezo, and Ezo instantly clocks who else has been messing with this case too. Right then, Marius interrupts. The document had already been found when his brother left. He shoots an apology for not getting the warning out sooner. Then the Marquis turns to Carol, who's been scratching her head in confusion this whole time, and asks if she's got any objections. When she stays silent, he vows to bring the whole thing straight to the king. Then Carol blurts out that he can't believe it's fake, and after that guy barely even gave him a chance, he still steps up to offer to go check it out. He asks Marquilla for permission to step into the courtyard. Then the guys rush over and slam both swords into the ground. The guard starts pounding the product, then bam, his spear snaps against it and the Marquis clocks it instantly. There isn't a scratch on that sword because it's the king's gift. Carol shrieks that this can't be real. Then the man immediately says he'll test his sword's strength right now. Marius snaps back that it's not necessary, grabs a sword that's already proven itself, and slams it into another blade. Then everyone watching erupts in shock. The guy boasts that this sword's edge is unmatched, and the Marquis nods like he can't deny it. Then Carol staggers back from the horror, jaw clenched and rage blazing. The Marquis decides Marius should seize the throne, marches straight to tell the king, and figures, surely, both sides won't object. Carol still stands guard over the broken sword, and the hero spots something unsettling. Then out of nowhere he erupts in a scream and lunges at his brother, yanking a tiny spare knife. But Moria saw it coming, snatched a proven sword, and chopped Carol's body clean in two. Then, furious at the injustice, he starts crying and dies right after. Marius then blurts an apology to the Marquis for trashing his garden while he braces for punishment, and the man shrugs it off, saying all he did was wipe out a liar and a thief, then turns to call him Count. The hero clocks it instantly. Marius is already being hailed as a count, while Carol's suddenly being branded a fraud and blamed as a thief. Just as the man offers to return inside and the hero follows him, Marius snaps around with a furious glare, and then Iko and Camillo charge right after them. So Marius took up the count's title. Then, thanks to Carol's stunt, his name got dragged through the mud, and right after that, he met with Lord Menzel to plan what came next. Carol's death and everything he did wasn't going to be public, so the Moore family snapped into action and secretly hauled the corpse to the cemetery for burial. The tale slides into a flirtier mood, and the hero spots the maid giggling behind his back, so he snaps, "What's going on?" She notices him checking out her clothes, and he shoots back that he looks just like an ordinary city peasant in them. Then he leans into it and says they fit him perfectly, and she immediately agrees. The hero strides into the room with Marius and Camillo, and the second he lays eyes on himself in those clothes, he thinks, "No way, I don't look like an aristocrat at all." But they talk him into believing it. Then the guy rushes to thank the hero and Camillo for saving the day, handing over a reward, small, sure, but given straight from the heart. The man says it's enough for him to keep the cooperation going, and then Marius corners Izo. "So what do you want as payment?" Izo answers that he wants rare or intel. The guy points to Mithril as the perfect example, and the hero nods right along. Then he leans in and tells him to contact Camillo, because Marius clearly has the info. Then it hits him he recalls something, and demands Iso just take it without questioning. Iso resists at first, but then caves and grabs it anyway. After the heat cools off, he breaks free from the amorous trance and heads back into the Black Forest to fetch Diana and bring her to the new Count's celebration. Camillo leads Azo straight to the right spot, then heads back home, crossing the forest with the torch held tight in his hands, until he spots the house starting to peek through the trees. It's like time swallowed him. He's been gone forever in his heart, and he's aching for his family, because right then, 3 girls are already waiting on the porch for him. Everyone crowds around Izo the moment he's back, cheering like it's a victory lap. Then they all pile into the house together, take their seats at the table, and the hero starts spilling every last detail. Diana's heart drops in an instant. She's flooded with memories of Carol's kindness, always there, always playing with her and everyone else. And then the tears hit, rushing down her face as she can't stop asking, why did it all end like this? She breaks down in tears, and the other girls rush to calm her, while the hero's mind spirals back to the forged Amber family sword he made, one that stole her brother's life. The girl blurts out an apology for breaking down, but he tells her to breathe. Crying right now is totally normal. Then he leans in and promises Carol's death will stay buried, and orders her to go ahead and cry her heart out right here, where no one can hear. Diana blurts out her gratitude, and the hero tells her, "Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to the estate. I'll be there for the celebration too." Rick figures he'll be gone for 2 or 3 days, agrees with her, and even apologizes. Then she shoots back that she can wait just fine, unlike Samia, and the second those words hit, the girl erupts into a scream. They burst into an argument, and Diana's tears flip into laughter. Then, out of nowhere, a calm smile blooms across the hero's face. The next day, Izzo barrels into town with a girl, gets off the cart ready to shake hands, only for her to shut down all that formal stuff like it's not happening. Then she spots Marius and rockets straight into his arms, right on cue. Camillo suddenly leans in to brag that this time he scoured the city and even found representatives from other races. Then he drops the bombshell that the giant city gate proves the old kings even made peace with giants, and the hero can't believe it. Then he figures the elves must live in the city too, but the man shuts that down. Those elves don't leave their village. Just as the tension spikes, Marius rushes over and throws out a heartfelt apology for making them wait. The hero clocks it immediately. He looks wiped out, like he hasn't slept a wink. Then the twist hits. Tomorrow, he's meeting the king, and the celebration is happening right after. He steps into the building and realizes he's got nothing to do until tomorrow, until a sudden employee pops up and blurts that Diana is calling for the hero. ISO storms out into the garden and realizes she just signed up for another showdown with him, and as if it's fate, he declares this will be the final lesson, then steps in and agrees to go to war. The girl and the hero smash into a full-on brawl, trading blows until exhaustion hits and they back off hard. Then Diana snaps and demands he fight her for real, at least once. In the end, the hero forces himself to go along, still reeling from how wild this twist is. Then the girl snaps into a fighting stance, and just like that, Iso drives a sword to her throat and steals the win. At first the girl is stunned, then it hits her. She never even saw the attack coming, and Iso clocks it. Her power keeps climbing every single day. He promises that with hard training, she'll soar to new heights. Then Diana bursts into joy, thanking the hero over and over. Her smile warms his soul just for a moment. The very next day, Marius storms into the king's court, spills every detail, and after the wild celebration, he's finally made Count Amour, officially. The hero called the celebration legendary. Then Marius raised a drink to the bright future of his family's home, and the whole crowd cheered, clinking and gulping until the cups ran dry. Right then, the hero's mind went straight to the girls, and he started plotting 2 perfect dishes he'd picked up here. Then Diana slid up beside him and gasped, "These dishes are incredible." At first, the hero freezes in surprise at her. Then he snaps into a grin and praises her dress. Because of her, he decides he wants to call her a rose. She tells him, "Don't embarrass me," but he drops the truth. He said it with his whole heart, because he'll probably never see her like this again. But then a bunch of guys barreled in and bombarded the girl with questions, cutting the conversation short, so the hero couldn't get back to talking with Diana until the celebration finally ended. The very next day, it's goodbye to everyone, and the hero tells Marius to rise up worthy of the title. Marius vows he'll do it. But then Enzo spots the nightmare. Diana is gone, nowhere to be found. Then he finally spills the truth about the real relic, hucks it into the cart so the hero can fix the sword the moment things slow down, and the hero nods, promising to repair it and bring it back. But the guy shuts that down, tells them they can't claim the sword, and begs the hero to hold on to it. Then, out of nowhere, Marius remembers something else he planned to give Asizo. Next, the goods get piled into the cart, and the hero and Camillo ride off to the right spot. The man figures Azo can push through the forest on his own, and he nods along. Suddenly, Camillo yells about the luggage, and the hero lunges for the box. Then the sight hits him like a flashback. He rips open the drawer lid on the spot, and a familiar girl pops out from underneath. He recognizes Diana instantly, and his world rocks with shock. The girl confirms it's really her, and that realization hits him even harder, because it turns out his family is about to be replenished. The hero demands what she forgot here, and she thrusts a letter from her brother into his hands, spilling their plan and proving it worked. Azo clocks that Diana's in the mix too, but he refuses to stop reading, and Maria tells him the girl's situation has flipped, so Azo decides to pass her straight to the hero before anything nasty can happen. Then the hero finally gets the whole picture. Right after that, he spots tiny print saying he can do anything with a girl if she doesn't mind, and he immediately chooses to act like he never read it. He realizes bringing her back won't be that simple, so he offers her a fresh start and pushes her toward a new home. Then she erupts in joy and agrees on the spot. After that, they take off, and on the road Diana starts getting more complicated, but Iso calmly insists that if she'd ever interfered with him, he'd have turned around and sent her back. Then he shrugs, calling himself a clumsy, stubborn blacksmith who can't lie, and tells her to keep on going down her way. Diana grins, swivels to Iso, and then he blurts out that she should call him informally, because family rules hit different. The girl nods and agrees. She calls the hero by name and tells him she's home now. Then Ezo grins back, congratulating Diana on her return. Next, the guys roll back home and find their meeting already waiting. Reich locks eyes with Diana and instantly declares the plan a success, while the hero is still totally lost, like, why is she doing this? Then the girls start chiming in, and boom, Reich and Samia are involved too. The hero presses for answers, but they shut it down with, "It's our girlish secret." And just like that, everything shifts. Something brand new ignites in Iso's workshop. Iso's forage welcomes Diana into the family, and their everyday life instantly lights up with non-stop smiles. Then, for the next week, they tour into expanding the house to make room for everyone. When the construction finally starts winding down, the guys burst into smiles, and Diana says she loved building that room with everyone. Then the hero leans in and asks if she's going to try it out today. The girl nods, and Iso shoves something into her hands. She cracks open the gift, and for a second she's stunned, because it's a blade forged by the hero himself. He tells them each person in his family has their own knife, so it's basically a family tradition, and right after, Diana gushes that the blade is stunning, while the hero steps in and offers to carry her things into the room. And he remembers he still has to buy bed linen, so he decides to hit the city tomorrow. Then the guys scarf down a quick dinner and crash into bed. Next day, they roll up to Camillo's store, and the guy greets them like it's no big deal. Then he spots Diana too, and suddenly the hero's smile freezes. Then he clocks that the store's packed with more customers, and he grins. Thanks to Camillo and Marius, he's got even more work to keep him busy, like Diana's about to show up. The man says, "Now I work with the Count," and that's when our business blew up. Then he suddenly remembers the hero was hunting a strange. Iza remembers it too. Then Maria drops the bombshell that a point Kara is coming to the capital soon, and Izo can't believe it. He knows this legendary metal is only added in the north, and Camillo steps in, telling him to stick with a point Kara if he goes looking. Of course, the hero agrees right away. Then the guys head outside to hunt for food, and the hero snaps. While I was gone, the girls kept working, and now we've got something to sell. That's why ISO calls them smart girls. Suddenly, the girl starts rambling about metal and her search. Then the hero snaps to attention, realizing that Hunt will get them nowhere, and right then he spots the other adventurers. Many people think he won't just be able to forge blades. He'll unlock a second power and then hit the road, traveling beyond what anyone expects. Suddenly, Samia catches his attention, claiming Iza wants to travel, but he snaps back that she's wrong because he was born for something else entirely. After that, Samia jumps up and storms out, and Reich instantly clocks the pattern. This hero always does things like that. Then he feels the weird stares on him, and before he can even process it, Diana blurts out how terrified she gets every time he leaves the house, and Reich realizes Diana's basically assuming Samia worries the exact same way. Then the hero finally gets it. He's vanished from the past world, and he rushes to reassure them he's not abandoning his family at all, and the girls light up with joy. When the guys finally roll back home, the hero clocks it. Sammy is staring off like something. S got her mind racing, and she tells him the rain S not letting up for a long time. Right on cue, ISO decides to grab water so they're set for tomorrow. Then the storm finally crashed down, heavy rain at last, just like Samia promised, and with nothing else to do, the guys huddled up and started hammering metal sheets together. Diana can't believe they're even doing it themselves, until the girls shout that they're the strongest here. She tries to hold back at first, but then she breaks into laughter. Next day, Rain kept hammering the world, and our hero rallied everyone to build simple models. Then he went for broke, melting his own knife in the capital to forge it himself. Suddenly, the girls lock eyes on ISO as he studies the sword. Then his skin prickles when he realizes someone's watching, and he whips around. Wright starts admiring his skills, and Diana steps in to support her. Then Samia declares the knife a masterpiece, and the hero thanks them both. Then he leans in and admits he couldn't forge one in the city, so he grabbed an old knife and turned it into a sword. From that moment on, he's convinced this place cranks out way better quality, because in this forge, he finally feels calm enough to do whatever he wants, yet he still has to dig out the real reason, no matter what. For days the rain kept hammering down, while the guys churned out brand new products in between drops, like the storm would never end, until the weather finally flipped. The girls burst into the street, soaking up the sunshine, and right then Samura reports that the rains finally stopped, so they've got to go hunting, and everyone jumps on her plan. The hero clocks that Sammy is bursting with energy like always, and Rake figures it's because she's thrilled he's living with them. Then Rake grins and says he's glad he's in such a good mood, only for Rake to snap back that the hero just doesn't get a girl's heart. The guys rush to the forge, and the hero hears it the moment he works with Reich. The hammer rings out like pure music, and then he realizes the girl is feeling it too. After a while, he pushes to wrap it up and grab something to eat, and Reich slides into the chair with him. Then the hero turns to her and asks if she wants to go for a walk. Then she catches herself thinking, I'm stuck in the forge all day and I barely get out, but even so, this is the kind of life that fits her perfectly. The hero nods like he solved the puzzle, and the girl slips in a heartfelt thank you for his concern. Then they march back to the forge, but ISO shuts it down fast and declares they're done for today. Right then, bam, a knock slams the door and a guy calls out asking if ISO is home. ISO hears that voice and instantly bolts to the door. A girl suddenly shows up in front of him, and when they lock eyes, she realizes it's been ages, so he laughs and says he's thrilled to see her again, calling her Helen. The girl strides into the forge, and the hero instantly thinks her sword is in trouble, but she shakes her head, tells him she's totally fine, and explains she came for a diagnosis because she's headed camping soon. The hero finally gets the full picture, then Helen shoves her weapon into his hands. He asks if she uses it a lot, and she says, almost non-stop. Still, the hero's gut drops when he realizes the blade is only lightly damaged. He even imagines her waving them goodbye while he realizes his swords are nearly impossible to ruin. Then the girl breaks in, swears this blade saved her life, and insists on thanking ISO for it. But he shuts down her gratitude cold, saying this is just his job. Then he promises the sword will stay by her side for a long time, while he quietly decides to repair it anyway. Right as he's about to start work, Helen suddenly calls out, asking if he can check out the process, and when he says he doesn't mind, she erupts in joy and starts jumping. ISO finally makes it to work, and the girls huddle in to watch. Then he lets out a breath when he sees the sword is barely hurt, wiping away only a few tiny scratches. After a beat, he hands the sword to the girl, and she instantly lights up at what she sees. She's thrilled with the result. He tells her the blade looks brand new, but what shocks him even more is how the hero can feel the difference in it. He asks if the scabbard needs fixing, but she shrugs and says she's already got used to them. Then the hero snaps into action and pushes forward with the next order. He spots Helen still parked in his workshop and figures she's just here to watch him work. Then she drops the bombshell that she'd often seen her father, a saddler, sweating over the same kind of craft. She had to run out of the house, but she still couldn't stop herself from wanting to see her father at work. Then, right on the spot, she asked the hero why she'd been forced to leave home, only for him to shut her down fast and say it's rude to dig into a woman's past. Then he decides to hear it out, especially if it comes with delicious food, because he's already wrapping up work when, out of nowhere, Samyat and Diana burst back home. They run into Helen and Diana freezes, because standing right there is the thunder sword of Helen, and she's scrambling to hold in her excitement. Then the hero tells the girl to train with Diana instead of paying for the job, and Helen starts to look totally confused until she agrees, and ISO warns her not to go all out. The girls head to training, and right on the spot the hero decides it's the perfect time to start sharpening his blades, while Wright swears he'll keep an eye on them, and then training begins. After a while the hero finally wraps up his work, then Wright drops the bomb, the training's over. Right on cue, a drained Diana and a beaming Helen show up on the doorstep. The hero fires off questions about the girl's abilities, and Helen tells him she's got a strong base, but her extra moves need refining. Give her time to practice, and she'll absolutely nail it. Izo nods along and admits it's a pretty straight read, then says a combat veteran couldn't have it any other way, and just when it seems done, Helen adds, Lena's strong too, for a palace guy. Then she asks him straight up if he trains Diana, and when she hears his answer, she leans in and tells him her own feints mirror his perfectly. The hero's stunned because she's remembering the combat skills of a man she fought once. Diana blurts out, so you really stood up for Iso for 15 minutes, and Iso shoots back that Helen was his very first opponent, armed with 2 weapons, which leaves Diana reeling. Suddenly the girl challenges him to a fight, but he quickly tries to dodge it, grumbling that he's a blacksmith and that it's getting dark, and then the hero offers her a place to stay the night, swearing he'll take her to the city tomorrow. A brand new day hits and the guys roll into the capital. Then the gate guard clocks Izo, calls him out, and the second his eyes land on Helen, he notices her too. The guy's jaw drops because the hero seems to know her. Then he spots his team, mercenary, beastman, dwarf, and aristocrat, and blurts out, so who are you really? Iso shoots back, just a simple blacksmith. As he steps into the city, he tells Helen he's headed to the store, then he cuts in with, I'm gonna say goodbye. The guys roll up to Camillo's shop and they don't come empty-handed, they hand him a brand new halberd. The hero tells him to sell it to the count since it'll make the guard's job easy, and the man nods, then says he doesn't have an appointment with Kara yet, but he's got something else in mind. He pulls out the mithril and thrusts it in front of Izo, and then the man lanes in, saying he wants the hero to forge that rapier with it too. He even asks whether he can slip his emblem into a low-key spot, and when he gets the go-ahead, he's ready to make his mark. Then the hero gives his word, and that guy leans on him with total trust, while Izo can't stop grinning, thrilled he'll finally get to try something other than steel, counting down to the day he'll get his hands on fresh material. The whole incident blew up inside a tiny wooden house, right in the section where the blacksmith shop was tucked away. A bunch of girls kept their eyes glued on the man's next move, because the same one wanted to shoo them aside to seize mithril, while Izo, dressed in special blacksmithing gear, gripped a chunk of ore in his hand. That dwarf had never laid eyes on anyone forging with mithril, especially not in her own home, so her heart was brimming with hope that today would be the kind of discovery that changes everything. Others also crowded in, eager to witness the man forge mithril into greatness, and nobody objected to their presence. Then the black-haired man finally steeled himself and got ready to start working with the mithril. He didn't hesitate, he tossed a chunk of ore straight onto the furnace's roaring coals to melt the mithril, because he knew this metal wasn't like the rest, and it demanded a totally different process than every other ore he'd ever handled. After that, a blacksmith from another world decided to forge mithril, the moment the heat dipped a little below what steel needed. Iso swung his hammer and smashed a chunk of mithril. Then, when he lifted his weapon, something totally unexpected hit him in the face. After a hit like that, steel usually bends and reshapes, but mithril refused to budge, staying exactly the same with not a single trace left behind. So the man kept battering the piece of mithril, every swing sharp and exact, again and again, while the dwarf just stared, awestruck by his handiwork. Then, out of nowhere, the black-haired man froze mid-motion. He couldn't believe it, mithril was way tougher and more stubborn than he'd ever imagined, and even his legendary hammer struggled, since after just a few strikes it was already cooling off mid-work. I wasn't upset at all. Deep down, he was actually glad. Even knowing this could unleash a ton of problems, he still couldn't resist the idea of conquering Mithra. Regular blacksmiths will struggle like crazy to forge mithril while that aura hangs in the air. They just don't have the skill for it, and Ezio simply smirked at the dwarf's remark. Ever since Ezio stepped into this world, he'd never seen anything like this before, but the moment he realized what it was, he refused to quit, kept working like a beast, and chased his dream of conquering this metal. Even if it wasn't easy, Iso refused to back down, because he already had everything he needed, and that cheat power was ready to carry him to victory. The other girls had no clue how deep this process went, while they stared at Izo in awe, like they were watching a thrilling game unfold. Izo kept swinging because mithril worked great for impact, but it cooled off fast, so he could only land a couple punches before he had to hold back. Then it hit him. He knew exactly how to crack this problem, and the black-haired man snapped his power on. Right away, a blazing flicker lit up his eyes. With a glance from his eyes, Iso read the world's materials like a blueprint. He realized the mithril was smooth, nothing like rough steel, and what he saw lit a switch in his mind, letting him focus instantly on stretching the material longer. It'll sharpen his focus so hard he'll spot even the tiniest details, and then he'll finally unleash his power to crush mithril. Soft, sweet melodies floated through the room. Everyone just stared in awe like they were hearing real music, and the girls lit up at every note as Iso kept working with OR. Man had been on the move for ages when the day finally slid into early evening, and he stopped dead to wipe the sweat off his forehead, only to realize the girls had been staring at him nonstop since lunch. He asked if they were bored, and they shot back that they were completely satisfied with everything. Right then, Azo snatched Rike's attention and ordered her to get a whetstone, and the elf happily started following his commands, until she realized he was skipping the tempering stage. Izo leaned in and told her this mithril was already tough enough, no need to harden it, while the blacksmith kept a basically uniform chunk of it steady in his hands. He stared in awe at how wildly different the materials from the other world were, and then Izo, weaponizing his powers and slick tricks, crushed the mithril ore. Meanwhile, Rike got the grindstone ready, and Iso jumped right into it, grinding the material hard. Then, after shaving off every leftover chunk on the machine, he kept working the job with tiny bits, using a small whetstone. Iso zoned in on his work with laser focus. His gut screamed that if he even blinked and eased his guard for a second, the whole preparation would fall apart. But he couldn't afford even a second of rest. This man was laser-focused on grinding mithril, and the girls just stared in awe at every amazing move. Soon the man snatched up the mithril sword he'd been handed, and with a confident voice he told everyone, "The blade is ready, perfectly smooth, no flaws, no weirdness at all." The blonde girl beamed as she strode up to Iso, practically itching to test the new sword, and when the man heard her request, he nodded and agreed. He also told the girl, clear as day, that the blade might be ready, but it still needed the handle and the rest of the parts before it could become a real sword. So when Diana picked up an unfinished one, the girl was stunned by how unbelievably light it felt. Izo had already heard the buzz about weapons from mithril. People swore they were as light as a bird's wing, but this one felt like it didn't belong in the same world as the rest, and Rike and Diana couldn't help but stare in awe at those mithril blades. Then the blonde girl blurted that she'd test the new weapon just outside the house, and Diana practically burned with unstoppable excitement. After what felt like forever, the whole crew spilled out onto the street, and everyone stared at the blonde girl like she'd just lit a fuse. Meanwhile, Diana snapped into a fighting stance, ready to swing the mithril sword. The very next second, the girl snapped that mithril sword into motion, and everyone was on tenterhooks, dying to hear what Diana thought about wielding weapons made of mithril. Celia couldn't shake the worry. Lately, Diana's stare had been sending chills down her spine, and that's exactly what she told the rest of the group. Yurisu and Rake couldn't make sense of what the animal girl was saying, but she looked worried and told them Diana was staring at her in a weird way, no hate in her eyes, yet the whole situation still made her uneasy. Rike noticed it too, but it didn't hit her the same way it hit Sally, because Sally's a beastman, and with her abilities, she can feel every shift in the air. Celia shot a surprised look. Those two never really think about how messy other people's lives can get. Right then, Diana burst into the room, practically buzzing, desperate to hear what set Celia off so hard. Celia's sudden appearance shot shock through her. Fear drove her straight to Izo for help, but he didn't even shift the conversation, and Diana just watched her with a teasing smile, leaving Celia blushing hard. Celia spent a while finally telling Diana why she'd been so worried, and the moment Diana heard those weird comments about her looks, her head spun, until she realized at last why Celia was terrified of being close to her. Realizing why Sally was so worried, Diana snapped into action and bowed to the animal girl, then begged her forgiveness with a trembling apology, leaving Sally utterly stunned by what the girl just did. The animal girl couldn't figure out why Diana was bowing in apologies, so she blurted out, shaking with nerves, what it was all about, but Diana only turned redder and started answering Celia's question while trying to hide her face. Turns out Diana was locked onto Celia like crazy just because she's super cute, so Celia's jaw literally dropped at her answer, and everyone else finally relaxed, relieved to hear the drama between them was nothing more than a harmless crush. Diana kept going and the girl shot Celia a proud, admiring grin, telling her how stunning she looked, from those fluffy ears to that sharp, cute tail, and even how beautiful Diana found the fur on the animal girl. Diana knew touching people without permission was a disgusting move, and Celia was dead set against it, so she stared the animal girl down, burning with embarrassment as Diana's words hit. But soon Celia caved to her feelings and let Diana reach up to her animal ears, and Diana lit up like a kid in a candy store. Everyone around them got exactly what that moment meant too, even Azo, who desperately wanted to be in her spot but forced himself to hold back. Diana whips her mithril sword through lightning fast, perfectly timed slashes, and that shimmering blade flashes in the sun like it's sending out dazzling sparks. Her footwork flows so smooth it's like she's dancing with steel, and everyone can't tear their eyes away from her breathtaking control, because Diana isn't just good, she's a true master of swordsmanship. Her swordwork moved like something he'd seen before, and the moment ISO clocked it, that familiar feeling hit, stinging his eyes and pulling a frown across his face as he remembered the broken, shadowy silhouette of his swordsman. ISO finally grasped the brutal truth. Weapons don't just use people, they rip lives apart, big or small, sword or gun, every single one has the same deadly purpose. With a command through his speech, the man snapped Diana out of that sword-forged fusion, and ISO realized controlling a light blade was way easier than he ever thought. Diana lit up because he finally noticed it, and since the weapon was so light, she barely had to strain to hold the sword. She moved with him faster, smoother, and the swordsman couldn't stop smiling. Right out of nowhere, the blonde girl got called by name. Rick and Celia had handed her a chunk of the tree so she could swing a mithril sword and go for a hit on him. Aizu nodded along with the experiment, and then it was showtime. Diana braced herself and charged into a fighting stance, her blonde blade angling straight for the tree. The girl snapped her mithril sword through the air and slammed it into the tree, and just like that the blade sliced clean through the wood, so smoothly that Diana's jaw dropped in pure disbelief. Rake and Celia stared as the girls fumbled through the day, while Diana, still reeling from that recent scene, went wide-eyed, yanked the weapon from the wood, and then couldn't help but grin as she inspected the sword, totally stunned by how incredible it felt. Diana burst into delight. She didn't even realize she'd cleaved that block, and the warrior swore it felt like she hadn't hit him at all, until it hit her that she'd gotten stronger. Then the girl thrust ISO the results after the test, and the man went still. Diana's moves hadn't bent a single thing, not a chip in sight, just a perfect blade that looked made for him. The black-haired man pushed for yet another test and told Diana right then, and Reich made her try slicing a full coil of metal with a mithril sword. Diana eagerly said yes. Right after that, the blonde girl snapped her mithril sword back into motion. Then she drove it straight into a coil of metal like it was made for her. Diana and Reich froze in shock at what they saw, staring at the mithril sword in pure awe, because even after that brutal attack, the blade was still spotless, and Iso couldn't hide his amazement either. The stunned man froze, mind racing, realizing that a knife, depending on how you wield it, can either save lives or ruin them. That sword left Iso completely baffled. The man just stared back, wide-eyed and speechless, and then the truth hit him. He'd forged something he'd never once managed before, and when the girls heard it, they froze in shock, staring at the gloomy man like they were afraid of what he'd become. He kept staring, wide-eyed and speechless, at the mithril sword he'd forged, its mirrored steel reflecting his own shocked face, and in that split second he flashed back to everything that's been happening to him lately. Yeah, the world has thrown him way too much. While he chased adventures, he also got slammed with terrifying sights of regular people caught in the fallout, and Iso clutched his sword in silence, no joy in it at all. He refused to let a blade this powerful get sold to just anyone. Iso never believed that just one sword could flip the world upside down, because he'd already forged plenty of sword orders, usually steel, and he knew too well. If a stronger blade like mithril landed in the wrong hands, it would unleash disaster across the world. With mithril in their grasp, the weapon won't warp or bend, and its edge slices through rocks like they're nothing but weeds, because with that blade in hand, nothing can stop them. He suddenly realized that this sword might someday decide the fate of the entire world, and that thought hit him like a punch. He didn't even know his hands could forge something like this, but he also knew he couldn't swing this gift around recklessly, because whatever he makes could rewrite the future. Iso froze in pure shock as the man's face went bone-white, realizing the weight of it all. Now he had to decide who would take the sword. That long, choking silence from the man had the girls freaking out, and just when the tension was about to snap, Celia burst in, calling out to Issa with a bestrays girl's worried voice. Still, he couldn't shake his thoughts. Making a mithril sword didn't hit the same as watching a man forge blades for Helen. That black-haired man knew he'd already kicked history off its rails just by forging an Amur family heirloom, and still, the thrill wouldn't quit. This job was turning his nerves to ash. Iso couldn't hold his worry in anymore, so he turned toward three girls and blurted it out. Reich let out a shaky breath of relief because her master had finally swung his attention back to them, and all the girls just hung on every word, staring at him with bated breath. With the girls watching so hard, Ezel went quiet again, because the thrill in him just choked everything down. Sharing his nerves with them felt impossible. Still, he managed to corner them and ask about the sale of the sword, while Iso shot worried looks at the mithril blade he'd just forged. The girls ignored his question, hanging on his next words, and Azo pressed on without their answer, warning them that this sword could slip into the wrong hands, unleash catastrophe on their world, and that they'd already witnessed what this blade can destroy. Izo was terrified of screwing up and handing this sword to the wrong person, and the sheer fear had him drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't even wrap his head around what his not-so-simple choice might unleash. Anxiety gnawed at him from the inside, yet Izu still managed to face the girls and spill the question that had been haunting him. The girls heard the man's words and went dead quiet for a beat, and that silence let Iso realize, oh, the shame, that he'd been shaking with such pathetic fear. After all, he's a guy whose mind has already aged past 40, so he snapped at himself for dumping his problems on everyone else. Even though Isaac knew that exposing this pathetic side might make the girls lose respect and vanish from this house, he had no choice. He couldn't hold it back. This guy had forged plenty of amazing stuff before, but this sword hit a whole new level, so Izo quietly told the group, and for a heartbeat everyone went silent until a soft giggle snapped the tension. A soft laugh snapped the man back to reality, and his surprise hit hard, because he'd expected something else, but the girls just giggled, and they were relieved Izo was basically an ordinary guy like them. The girls weren't disappointed by ISO at all. They just knew it was brutally hard not to get stuck on that problem while forging products this incredible. ISO stared at his companions in total amazement, and their reaction hit him with a wave of shock. Reich was a dwarf, so the girl figured her master, Izo, would never even dream up something like this, yet she still sensed exactly what he felt, because every blacksmith carries that kind of burning responsibility. That feeling was planted in her from childhood, so she assumed, straight from the heart, that nearly every creator on Earth had felt it too. The creator can't see the future. He has no idea who will end up wielding the sword of the defender of the weak, or the one who turns into a bloodthirsty tyrant, because the blacksmith never controls what his customers decide to do, so ISO shouldn't have drowned himself in those fears. The black-haired man froze at the shock of his companions rushing in, then he stared, trying to make sense of what they'd just said. Right as everything hit him, Celia suddenly shouted to Izo too. She told him, if those heavy thoughts come back, just lay them on me, and then she hit him with the truth, we're family. The other girls nodded right along with Celia. Isle couldn't believe the warm support they gave him. Talking about his family had him blushing hard with embarrassment, but the girls' words filled his chest with comfort and shoved the sadness right out, so he just laughed awkwardly and tried to play it off. Then the man awkwardly bowed and thanked the girls for everything, head down, pouring out his huge gratitude like a promise. A single tear born from those warm feelings slid down to the ground. Izo got instantly embarrassed, realizing he'd actually been moved by their support, scrambling to hide his reddened face, and the girls only met his reaction with sweet, knowing smiles. Then the whole gang slammed straight into ISO, clinging to him in crushing hugs, and ISO jumped back, totally caught off guard by the sudden embrace. He realized the girls weren't actually crushed by his pathetic fear, and for the first time in his life the guy felt something good. Those tight hugs flooded him with warmth, and then a grateful smile lit up his face. After that, Iso took a moment to get his head straight. He slapped his cheeks with his palms, shook himself awake, and finally felt a ton better. The girls breathed relief when the man finally snapped out of it, then bright smiles erupted across their faces. In this world, Iso was handed the role of creator, and that was his job, plain and simple. So yeah, one day I'll build exactly what I want, not just for myself, but for my clients too, no matter who they are. Now the man felt unstoppable. His family had his back. Celia noticed it too. Ezio finally cracked a real smile at the. With the girls backing him up, the man finally started to feel like himself again, so he started bragging to Celia about how great he was, and she shut it down. Then the whole crew erupted in laughter over the wild mess that just happened. Grins wouldn't even budge off their faces. Iso caught on fast. With his companions standing beside him, there was nothing he couldn't pull off. He chased a bright future with his family, until a small group burst back into the house, and Izo told the girls, "We're heading out to eat after I finish my work." Then he dove right back into sharpening his weapon. The next day they kicked off the final stretch, forging the guards and handles for their weapons. Mithril was a pain to work with, so they went with steel instead, and on the guard Izo carved a giant, sneaky fat cat so nobody would catch on. At last the mithril rapier was finished, and it was pure perfection, from the handle all the way to the gleaming blade. Izo drilled his eyes into the finished blade, hunting for even the tiniest flaw, only to find it was flawless like perfection made metal. Then the man slipped the sword into Rika's hands so she, as the dwarves' representative, could judge the work, and Reich stared at the weapon in awe. Now Izo finally steadied himself and stepped back into the world with zero doubts. After a bit he burst out and showed the seller the weapon he'd forged, and the gun shop owner couldn't help but admire what Izo had made. So yeah, that mithril rapier slid right into Camillo's shop, and Izo even managed to pry info from the seller, who spilled all the newest happenings in this world. At the same time, the guy got hit with an order from the Count's people: restore the halberd, no delays. Camillo insists there's no push for war or conquests, just the occasional little border scuffle with monsters, but the rumors swear there are simmering disputes brewing between people. The black-haired man took off with the girls, while Izo strained to pull a wooden cart loaded with supplies, and a whole group of girls stood ready, guarding him with hawk-eyed focus. Diana braced herself, eyes darting across the area as she hunted for whoever was out there. Then Azo noticed her sudden shifts and blurted to Celia what was going on, and the animal girl spilled the truth. Turns out Diana was hunting for a wolf cub, and somehow she stumbled right onto him, because lately he's been showing up in their area more and more. Then they stumbled on a she-wolf nursing her cubs, and ever since, Diana's obsession never died. The moment she spotted those little wolves, her face lit up and she begged to see them again. Ezo figured out the locals' secret too. You can tame wolves with the right bait. Celia felt it too, she just couldn't let Diana in on this, because if the blonde girl found out, she wouldn't stop until she had it figured out. Reich finally realized the warrior shouldn't be in the dark, so he agreed to keep it that way. Meanwhile, Reich scrambled to warn Diana, because she'd completely forgotten about her hunt for the cubs. Then soon enough, the whole company made their way back home. It's been ages, and then bam, an unknown girl shows up at their house, slips off her hood, and lets out a shaky, nervous sigh before she taps the wooden door with a light knock. Every single person heard the knock, and the man snapped into action. He shot to the door and swung it open, stunned to find a stranger standing there. A girl with sharp elf ears suddenly popped into view, staring at Iso with wide, nervous eyes while clutching a bundle to her chest, and she was honestly gorgeous. A jolt hit the man when he clocked the stranger's look. Those sharp elf ears gave her away instantly. Izzo realized she was an elf, and then she asked the big question: did this place belong to his forge? The black-haired man shot back an easy yes, and relief lit up the elf's face, because she finally had the chance to make her request. Then Iso swung the door open and let a sudden guest in because he wanted to hash out everything with her. She nodded, accepted his offer, thanked him, and once the guest was inside, Iso poured her a drink. At that point, she handed him a drink mixed with water, and the stranger thanked her with real gratitude. Then right after, Iso pushed harder, demanding to know why the girl had shown up at his house. The blonde elf shoved her bundle into his hands, then flicked the fabric loose, and right there, a sword lay in front of him, smashed almost to nothing, leaving the man stunned. Ulfika broke the news with a heavy sigh. This was a mithril sword, but it showed up cracked and wrecked despite being made from mithril ore, and that stranger pressed Ezo to fix it. He took the girl's words in stride, then realized this sword's blade was thin as a razor but stretched out just like a broadsword. Then the man pressed the girl for her hopes on repairing the sword, and the elf swore she wanted it brought back to its true original state, though she'd still accept it if that miracle couldn't happen. Iso couldn't believe it. She wanted to fully restore that sword, not just fix it a little. Then he shot the stranger a question: did she come alone? The guest nodded, and Iso's jaw dropped, because she'd been using concealment magic just to get here. But he didn't mind at all. He just needed to know if anyone else was with her, and the stranger let out a shaky sigh of relief. The next beat hit, Ezo snapped that he was taking the order, and the elf instantly fizzed with agitation, eyes wide at his words. His shout was so loud the other man jerked like he'd been startled out of his skin. The girl snapped back to herself, blushing as she hurriedly apologized for snapping at him, and when he finally clocked that his client was a total novice, he leaned in and asked when this order was supposed to be delivered. Getting that order done quick was a win for the elf, so he offered them 2 weeks to do it, and Iso snapped up the deal, thrilled out of her mind. Then the man vowed to try again and reclaim the sword made of mithril. Just like that, the house door swung open, and Iso beamed as the girls came back. Deanna and Celia stepped in and shouted that they'd arrived, until ISO's eyes snapped to a client inside. Two girls spotted Elphica and instantly froze in awe, couldn't stop staring at her blonde elf beauty. ISO told them why the elf showed up. She'd come to this house to get her sword repaired, and when the girl stepped forward, she introduced herself, bowed, and said her name was Liddy. Diana stepped up and introduced herself back to the girl, telling Lee D that she was ISO's assistant at his blacksmith shop. Then the girl curtsied. Salia was so thrown off by Diana's sudden manners that she stumbled through her own introduction to Lee D. Cheeks burning. Diana's heart skipped as she caught Salia's flustered face, and right then Rika stepped up, introduced herself to Lady, and said she was a student of ISO. ISO told the girl she wasn't just anyone, she was family to him. Then Lady hit him with another request. She wanted to watch her practice with her sword every single day. She knew asking that was bold, but this was too important to ignore. But ISO clocked how much that sword meant to the girl, so he didn't fight it at all, and the blonde elf looked at him with real gratitude for standing his ground. Then she even pressed the man to give her a corner of their garden, where Lady could move in and patch up her sword, but when Issa heard her next request, his eyes widened, because monsters and savage beasts roamed that place. Liddy couldn't even read why he was spiraling until she felt it too. The magic here was insanely thick, and that meant they wouldn't stand a chance of getting close. Asa went speechless the moment he heard the girl, just staring at the elf like his brain froze, until she told him the truth. Their house was surrounded by an insane amount of magic, so no trees could grow here, and the animals couldn't even come close. Lady figured that's why Izo picked the house spot, but the truth was way uglier. He had zero clue, just grabbed a random place and moved on. The elf stared in shock because she'd already watched Azo snap that rapier the way a blade and local magic would, and now she was sure the girl had figured out exactly how he did it. Lydia couldn't wrap her head around how he was pulling all this off, and Iso's face burned at her own words, so he stammered that it was all pure instinct, then realized he couldn't just go bragging to everyone about his cheating gift. Even the elf felt uneasy as her mind twisted over that man. Then Izo mentally begged her forgiveness for the lie, and the truth hit him. With his ability, he could wield magical power, which was why everything about this place felt so different to him. If you trust Liddy's words, then this is exactly why Izo couldn't forge the same sword or hit the same capital-level feat as he did here. The magic in the capital was too weak, and the man simply couldn't recreate that mithril masterpiece. Then Iso slammed the conversation into a new lane, because he couldn't stand leaving that girl passed out outside, so he tucked her into the guest room, and the other girls didn't even blink. Liddy was totally stunned. Just like that, he let her stay in his house, no questions asked, even though he already had 3 wives. And Izzo, with a whole cluster of girls, practically fell off their feet when Liddy said the word wives. Then Azo wore a dark, gloomy look and told Letty point-blank that they were just his family, not his wives, and the reason those rumors blew up was Camillo. Lydia felt her face burn after the dumb thing she blurted out, while the other girls still fumed over the latest incident. Then Ice let out a huge sigh of relief as the misunderstanding got cleared up for real. Diana suddenly snapped to it, grinning. Turns out they'd finally lived together with the elf. Iso quickly told her the catch. The elf would only stay while the sword got repaired, then she'd just watch the whole process as it worked its magic. The girls lit up when the elf stepped into their house, and the guy just stood there awkwardly, soaking up their cheers. Then he announced dinner to everyone, and once it was over, he finally said he needed to rest. Celia even told ISO they'd be eating a huge, leafy falcon for dinner. Next, Izzo ordered Diana and Rika to whip up a guest room for Liddy. Then he and Salaya got ready to cook the bird, with up to 5 wings, when suddenly Salaya snapped and called to the man. Then Izu snapped back to the truth. Elves don't eat meat, only to have his awkward spiraling thoughts cut short by a blonde elf showing up out of nowhere. She asked for permission to help with the cooking, and Iso snapped back, elves don't eat meat, but Liddy quickly shut him down, saying she'd already spent her days in her village plucking birds. That beast-race girl jolted in shock, because Sautelia swore elves only munch on veggies, yet it turns out they absolutely don't. Izo got mortified because he thought the same thing, and Lady didn't even bat an eye. She'd heard that stereotype before. In most cases, elves could grab vegetables and other plants straight from the forests, so getting those supplies was way easier. Iso nearly jumped at the thought. Even in a whole new world, stereotypes still hit hard. Liddy shrugged and said, yep, elves eat meat, and in their forest they mainly hunt deer and birds. But potatoes are their main meal. Elf folk grow them in the fields, so fishing isn't something most people join in on, though every now and then someone just might. Athoda acted like a genius because betting everything on hunting alone, especially with big settlements in mind, was pure madness. Then the elf explained everything, and the man nodded, ready to team up with her and cook the bird. Liddy's agreement made her beam, and after a bit the leafy falcon was fully ready. An irresistible aroma rolled across the table, with sausages and tortillas waiting right alongside it, and the whole group dove into the meal with wild excitement. Next morning, the whole crew swarmed into the forge yard, staring at Laverlegui's shattered sword like it was a riddle with teeth. Then the long mithril sword repair finally kicked off, and the first move was piecing it back together, snap by snap, just like a puzzle. The man locked in on his craft, and with total control of his power, he fine-tuned the flame's temperature like a master. ISO realized that using steel would only ruin a sword that was already broken. And after joining that material, it's almost impossible to ever get the sword back to its old power and razor sharpness. Yet Izo's using a mithril blade anyway, so he never worries, and Liddy keeps her eyes glued to every move he makes. Even though he knew the pieces of that weapon wouldn't fit back together easily, the dark-haired man went for it anyway, rolling up his sleeves to breathe life back into a shattered sword. The blacksmith cranked the forge, heating up the very tool he needed, and Liddy caught something wild too. Mr. Izzo was weaving magic into his work while he went. He didn't even try to deny it. Yeah, he can use magic, and it's honestly pretty simple. ISO flares up a flame when he wants, or chills it down by whipping the wind through it, and Liddy hung on every word. She knew this kind of magic demanded training, so it sent a chill through her that the man barely knew a thing about the local magical power. A cold smile snapped onto her face, and the girl decided he was lying. ISO squirmed under her gaze, and that smile hit like a threat. He couldn't admit he'd just stumbled into this power, and his companions couldn't use magic either. So he dodged the whole question and dove straight into work. Using blacksmith's tongs, he fought to clamp a snapped chunk of the sword back onto the blade, and his student Reich jumped in to help, both of them locked in, eyes sharp and hands steady, while ISO swung a hammer to force the pieces together. While Reich braced the sword's pieces, Izzo rushed to clamp them together, landing steady, exact strikes at the join. But steel fought back. It was way harder to fuse than mithril, so Izzo should have had no trouble, and yet he didn't. Azo knew a special tool could get the job done, but once the heat got involved, control would slip fast, and he'd lose the chance to swing a hammer, so he took matters into his own hands and worked manually. The whole room zeroed in, and the hammer blows sang like music as Reich jumped in to help the man fix the sword, while Ezon realized they'd already pushed past the exact heat they needed. So he rushed to tell Lady, as he pushed this case forward, they'd finally get a shot to break that cursed sword, right now. Her expression snapped instantly, and fear gripped her the moment she realized what it meant for her weapon. She charged up to the blacksmith, begging him to fix her sword, only for Lady to doubt it on the spot, thinking it might be beyond repair. Izzo fidgeted at how close she was, but he wouldn't let her put it down. He snapped that it wasn't hopeless, just harder than they thought. The job would take more time. Lady let out a huge sigh the moment she heard Izzo's answer. Thank God her sword would be repaired after all, and Izzo just grinned back, itching to test the weapon's metal limits, though he knew if he pushed it now, he'd end up cracking the blade. Then it hit him he had to handle that weapon with ruthless care, so he clenched his focus and slid right back into working with Reich. While he worked, his eyes flashed with pure brilliance every time he used his abilities. That's exactly what Lady clocked, and she couldn't stop admiring the way he could actually see the streams of magical power. This was the first time Ezzo had ever heard about that. Then Liddy told him, when you work, swing the hammer, pull your magic into that rhythm. And once she finished, ISO finally got it. He wasn't just working, he was fighting to keep those bright particles from falling apart. Ezzo flinched when she suddenly came at him again. After all, she was right there, and she could actually see the magic power. She froze in embarrassment the moment she was that close to him, and Lady caught on fast. She rushed to apologize to Izzo, then steadied her voice and told him calmly that he could finally see magic power. The blonde girl finally felt ready to prove the man's magic was real, because he could still see the magic power, he just never understood it, and once it clicked, he realized he'd been staring at that glowing light the whole time while he worked. A glowing light erupted, and it wasn't just light, it was a magical force. The man snapped his gaze to the split sword, and he saw tiny particles flicker inside it. Iso realized he wasn't just seeing magic power, there was something more underneath the glow, and Liddy was finally relieved that the nagging question was solved, so Iso thanked her for the explanation. After a while, the man leaned in and scrutinized Lady's mithril sword. Something about it made his skin crawl. So Azo snapped on his ability, and in the blink of an eye his gaze flickered as he checked the connections. The parts he'd linked were holding strong, but the magic power was off, and that felt dangerously wrong. A massive footprint suddenly crushed the spot where the sword pieces met, and the man snapped to it. There were open gaps at the joints, like the blade hadn't fully locked together. Even if the sword looked flawless on the outside, the magic was still leaking through the cracks at the joints, so Aizu knew that once the form was restored, this blade wouldn't last long in real use. Tired and clueless, the man hadn't even caught it yet, Eso had to find a way to fix it fast, and with the dark-haired man deep in thought, he finally turned and shouted for Lidi. Iso shoved her sword into the blonde girl's face, right where the chip should have been, and Lidi immediately spotted weird gaps of magical power buzzing at the sword's joints. Reich couldn't even spot the magic power, and it instantly made her feel out of place, while Celia and Diana knew nothing about the whole case, so they just stood by in silence, watching like normal workers. ISO snapped that this wasn't going to be solved by simple fixes, and Lady knew it too. Bending the sword back into shape wouldn't cut it this time. Maybe if Iso slams a few more hammer strikes on that sword, right in the same spots, he'll finally get the magic flowing again, and when he blurts out that plan, Lady's jaw drops. Isa told the elf to just snap her sword back into its original shape, and the man laid it out for the girl, pick how she wanted to repair it. Lydia froze because there was no way she could answer that fast. This choice was brutal, and the whole room sat there in tense silence, waiting for her move. So Lydia finally made her decision. With zero hesitation, she demanded they bring her sword back to its true shape, then tried to revive the magical power flowing through it too, but the girl still picked the first option. Izo knew the elf would pick this choice, because bringing the sword back to its shape still wouldn't be enough, so Lady had to stake everything on a man. All she cared about was one thing: she needed to swing her sword the same way as before, because that blade was her one perfect lifeline, and she couldn't stop worrying about it. Iso got it the second he saw her struggle, then flashed a confident smile and told Lady she could count on him, and just like that, her panic melted away and her worries dropped, while Lady stared at him with pure admiration. Then Iso snapped back into motion and returned to work. He gave his own cheeks a quick slap to shake himself out, knowing he had a brutal task ahead and he needed to get ready. He couldn't afford to disappoint Lydie. He'd already promised her he'd fix that sword for real, and he'd never stain his forge's name either, so he snapped into full focus. First, he had to bring the blade back to its proper shape, and that meant Iso was going to build a wooden mold using every last fragment. They shoved back into work. There was the broken sword, sizzling on blazing coals, while Reiki kept the heat just right by feeding it dry grass. Iso and Rick then hammered the mithril into shape and carved it into a brand new plate. The sword's pieces started fusing inch by inch, so they wrapped straw around the blade and shoved it back into the heat. Then the forging roared on, while melodious beats thundered through the forge. He was locked in on his work, every punch landing clean and packing real force. Then they snapped the mithril fragments together, hammered them, flipped them over, and did it all again over and over, while the sun slid down behind the window. The very next morning, everyone was back in the forge room, and they threw themselves into the work again right away. Diana and Salia stepped outside to grab fruit, then boom, with one strike, So froze mid-motion. He stared at the sword, stunned because the man could feel it. He'd suddenly gotten heavier. Izo shouted at Lydie, and the elf snapped her eyes to him right away. He told her the sword still held more magic power, and as he spoke, the blade felt like it was getting heavier in his grip. The blonde elf locked eyes on her sword, then after a heartbeat, nodded to the man's words, relieved and thrilled to see that Iso was insanely skilled with magic. He stared in disbelief as mithril kept getting heavier from the magical power, and he couldn't believe what he just learned about it. With the razor-thin sword he forged, he never expected to feel this way. Maybe the metal's purity was the culprit, but either way they couldn't stop now. They had to keep working. Iso had never clocked it before, but once he started swinging that sword, he poured everything into every strike, and the magical particles exploded brighter and stronger with each blow, while the mithril's power kept climbing higher. Iso started breaking into a sweat from how hard he was pushing, and the moment the man checked the job, he realized this repair was way heavier than the rest, so Iso had to lock in with every ounce of focus and strength. More time slipped by, and by early evening the sky had ignited in red fire, so the exhausted man finally decided to push the repairs to tomorrow. He'll need a little more time to wrap up this repair, and after all that hard work the man downed a drink to cool off. Then out of nowhere someone shouted his name. Celia was the one who rushed back home, telling him she'd accidentally ripped her bag on the way, so the animal request girl grabbed his help to collect everything, and Iso immediately agreed to help her. Iso had to rush to help Samia, so he ditched the forge cleanup and handed it to Rick, while Lydie stepped in too, because she refused to let the dwarf be stuck scrubbing alone. After a while, Azo and Samia finally pushed through to the spot she needed in the forest. Then the man spotted Diana. She was standing there, dead quiet, searching for something, and the girl kept waving at them, begging them to stay silent. Azo just didn't get what was happening. Xavier clocked the sign instantly and understood the whole plan, while Diana stood poised and ready, eyes burning with impatience. Then, out of nowhere, someone burst up from under the bushes. Sally dug through the bag like she meant business, hunting for something. Then she snapped a piece of jerky out and tossed it. In the next heartbeat, the puppies surged forward like magnets, one barking loud at the sight, the other thrusting its nose in, trying to get every last whiff of that meat. The moment the cubs showed up, Diana's cheeks flared red like a wildfire. Those adorable puppies had her buzzing with excitement, and a sharp little cry of pure emotion nearly burst out of her mouth, while Siley, quietly worn out, kept watch over the restless girl. Fluffy little ears wiggled, tails thumped, and dark eyes sparkled. These puppies were pure cuteness overload, and even so couldn't deny it. Diana was absolutely thrilled with the cubs as they happily dug into dried meat. Suddenly, Diana's eyes snagged on one little puppy. She stared right at him, and he yapped like a happy song because that tiny wolf was having the time of his life. At the exact same moment, ISO's hand got clamped hard, and the guy snapped his eyes shut from the sudden sting, still confused until he saw Diana's thrilled grin, and then it all clicked. She was beaming, absolutely delighted by that off-the-chart sweetness. The next moment, the puppy cocked his little head in pure curiosity, and in the girl's eyes he got even more adorable, while Diana's cheeks burst red with emotion. Diana couldn't hold back her delighted smile at that sweetness, and with her emotions spilling over, she tapped the man's arm lightly. Ezo had to just sit through Diana's bursts of affection, even as he tried to rein her in, because his shoulder would probably end up aching after. Celia, though, she'd already seen this kind of moment 1,000 times. After a bit, the girls marched back to the house with the man, while Izo slung a bag of loot over his other shoulder, wincing from the last incident, and then the man suddenly spotted something that stunned him. Turns out that dark-haired man clocked Reich and Lidi huddling together, whispering like there was no one else around. Then the girls cut the conversation short and hurried over to greet them. Lidi was racing to teach the dwarf how to use magic power, but Reich just couldn't grasp how she could ride the flow. Lidi insisted dwarves had it easier, and with Or's help they could cast magic. So while Lidi crashed at their place, she jumped at the chance to teach Rika that magic art, and Iso didn't even hesitate. He was downright thrilled to have a student learning spells. He knew that with his own reading skills he'd probably learn nothing, but Reich was a whole different beast. That girl lined in, listened hard, and soaked up brand new knowledge like a sponge. With Reich set to forge a one-of-a-kind weapon and finally earn the courage to go home, the whole group stared as Lidi taught Rika, while Diana couldn't hide her envy because Rika was learning from a stunning elf. Then the man's mind snapped to it hard, and by the time he did, the day had already slipped into late evening, bright stars flickering above as Iso loosened some material from his hands. Dizzo yawned through pure exhaustion, staring at the chosen material and wondering if it could even hold up for his work. Then he swept his eyes across the room and nodded, because there was clearly enough space there for his case. Right after that, ISO started shaving off tiny wood curls, humming under his breath as he worked, and with lightning-fast hands, he whittled a chunk of wood down to shape. Morning burst in fast, the sun climbed up, and the sky finally warmed with light. Izo never even went to sleep. He stayed on duty, building a tiny wooden shelter and tucking it up in the top corner, with bowls laid out for water and salt. Turns out the guy built himself a Shinto altar, odd shape and all, but it'll pass for a proper Japanese setup. And with that, Izo finally calms down in the workshop, because the creator can't stop smiling over the altar he just made. For a split second, he wondered what the other gods of this world would feel, and prayed they'd love his design too. Meanwhile, a bunch of girls just jolted awake, grins blazing, and marched straight to the wash basin. Then Celia strode to the forge and found a tiny man kneeling there, praying. More girls drifted over to her, staring at the man like he was a mystery they couldn't solve. Right then, Iso clocked it and went, "Good morning," as they crossed paths. Then he confessed he was performing a sacred northern homeland ritual, worshipping the gods from his side of the world. And even though the man only half lied to them, Diana's face lit up because Azo could honor God right there, with just a tiny little house. Then Iso told them, "In my country, even the tiniest house can turn into a living temple, packed with gods and spirits." And the girls stared in total awe, blown away that a custom like that existed in the north. Aso told them that only people in his homeland usually did something like this. So Celia leaned in and asked the man if she could try it too, and Lidi begged for her turn as well, but Aso didn't even flinch about them worshipping his god. Then the man started laying out the rules of prayer, and the girls listened like they were soaking up fire, trying the poses with wild curiosity, laughing as they felt his experience firsthand, and Aso getting ready to pray at the Shinto altar again. He had no clue if a god even existed in this world, but he still dropped to his knees to pray and thank the heavens anyway, while the other girls held the prayer pose beside him, and Letty kept it a little more neutral. After the prayer, Ezio couldn't help but hope just one god might finally show up in this world. Then he waved the girls over for breakfast. A temple without a master feels pointless, but if anyone's still there, they'll step in, either to help him finish the job or to join the hunt themselves. Azo is begging God for a little mercy. He just wants everyone to stay full, so his family can keep smiling, and so they're finally okay. The whole crew packed back into the forge, and the dark-haired man leaned in to tell the girls he was pushing his work forward. Then he snapped out the plan. Reich would team up to help with the blade, while Celia and Diana took charge of carving the wooden handle. The girls lit up and gladly took the jobs. Izo is gonna keep working with Mithril for the next few days, and at the very least, he's determined to get the sword back toward its original shape. When he works with Mithril, Ezo can't afford to space out. He has to lock in with full concentration. If Ezo swings without thinking, nothing holds, and if he throws the blow with even a bit too much force, he could wreck everything in an instant. If a man truly mastered the work of magic, everything would feel effortless, but Izo wouldn't have been a blacksmith if he tried to live on magic power alone. Almost no blacksmith in this world could tame Mithril, but this guy did, slamming his hammer into the glowing metal, and even though the work nearly broke him, every strike rang out with this gorgeous, melodious music. Then the man pulled up short for a quick breather, just long enough to catch his breath, water in hand, as he asked Lady if she liked watching him work. The blacksmith's usual grind can feel dull, but Iso's work was anything but ordinary, and Lidi couldn't get enough of it. The man even bowed to her and thanked her for the compliment. The girl kept right on talking, because for elves who have lived for centuries, time zips by in a blink, so Issa's work never gets dull to her. The three girls practically exploded with joy at the blonde elf's words, and their starry eyes locked onto Linety like she was the only thing that mattered. Issa's stomach dropped when he realized Line was way older than her face ever showed, because yeah, elves are the kind of centenarians that live forever. Then Lady admitted she still loved the sound of it back when Issa was working the forge, because in the elf village, no blacksmith could ever hammer out something that beautiful. Reich was blown away when the forge roared. It sounded nothing like any other blacksmith's work, and he soon learned the truth. Mithril sings a whole lot sweeter when a smith channels magic into the craft. So the more a blacksmith masters magic, the sweeter and more beautiful the sound rings when he hammers metal. Lady praised Iso for his skills, calling him a great fellow, but after those words, the girl's spirits sank. Thanks to the elf's words, Isaiah burned with motivation. He poured magic straight into the mithril and made every second count, but he also knew better than to brag, because praising himself too hard could wreck everything. To keep every worker in the forge from losing their fire, they shut it down for a day, just to recharge their battle spirits, and the girls loved nothing more than heading outside to fish and soak up the fresh air. That dark-haired man finally let out a pleased breath. His assistants were resting, and he lived for honest work, because back at the galley he knew one thing for sure: real work needs real rest. It's been a while, and Izo's back at it, hauling water from the river with those massive jugs like it's nothing. After his last rest, he finally feels a bit stronger. Then out of nowhere, something weird grabs his attention. He froze the instant he laid eyes on the scene, because that man couldn't tear his gaze away, eyes blazing wide, staring in pure awe at whatever had him stunned. Iso spotted a blonde elf, and the girl inched her palm onto the tree trunk. Right then, magic erupted around her, sparkling power swirling in the air, and she snapped her gaze to the man. He greeted Liddy awkwardly, and the man snapped, asking why she was outside, because out there could get deadly fast. Liddy got it, but she stayed clear of every beast and monster, and even with all that magical power flooding the air, not a single animal dared to show up. Then Asu told them a monster might show up, but Lady shot that idea down. This place felt safe to the girl, no doubt about it. She never imagined that anyone in this forest could snap and turn into a monster, because the rules of this place never budge, not even a single inch. And if monsters suddenly pop up out of nowhere, it's almost always because there's a nearby cave leaking stagnant magic. So the blonde elf snapped the warning, and Iso finally caught what she meant. Just as he figured this was the reason, an aggressive bear showed up out of nowhere. Right then, so Amizo urged Ladidi to turn that spot into a nature reserve, but she shot the idea down fast because trouble can strike in an emergency at any moment. So he nodded along with her opinion, and the real win was this: they'd be ready for it. Then the man dropped his gaze at the those. But then he had to ask, why is Lady out here in the woods? And the second the words left his mouth, the girl's face snapped into something else. Inzo caught that shift instantly, and he rushed to smooth it over, blurting that she might not want to tell him the reason. The blonde girl went quiet for a beat, and you could tell she was holding back, ready to answer but not sure how. Then Ligidati leaned in and said she wasn't stalling at all, she was just gathering magic power, and the man couldn't wrap his head around why she'd do something like that. Then he leaned in and told him the truth: elves don't just eat food, they also have to soak up magic power, and that's why there are barely any elves in other cities. After Letty finished, Iso turned to leave the forest. That blonde elf wasn't having it. Her smile vanished and a cold stare snapped onto his face, and then she fixed her eyes on him and called out to Iso. In a cold, sharp voice, she grilled him with more questions about how to absorb magic power, and the man felt the girl's wary eyes on him. But Enzo didn't need more questions. He already heard everything that mattered, and Lady didn't have to say a single word more. Then the dark-haired man strode into the house, cutting the elf loose behind him. Lady jolted at Izo's words, and a warm light spread through her like relief, because he never got the truth out in time. Time's passed since that scene, and now everyone's already crammed into the forge, swinging into action again after ISO sends the word, work hard. Nobody pushes back. The man wrestles the mithril down to the exact size they need, and with that wooden mold doing its magic, the sword snaps back to its original look. At last, the final stage of their work was here. ISO grabbed his blacksmith's hammer again and swung into finishing the repairs on Lady's sword. While he worked, the man yanked Lady's focus with a single question. He asked how her sword broke. The moment the words hit, color drained from her face, trapped in painful memories, and she couldn't even force out an answer. ISO didn't shove the girl, he just couldn't stop wondering what could shatter something that solid. In his head, it was simple. Any man worth his steel would want to forge a sword that refuses to break, even in a hit like this. Then Liddy fired up her tale, but when magic caused her sword's breakdown, she couldn't spill every detail. Still, if you want to master that mithril weapon, you'll need to pour your magic power into it. The moment the man heard about this method, his eyes went wide, and Lee kept right on telling her story. Her sword was prized all across her village. Then, out of nowhere, something happened to him. The magic went too hard, then the sword shattered to pieces. The elf just sagged at those words, and that's why she needs a blacksmith who can fix it and forge it back to at least its original power. Iser caught on fast too. He'd have to crank up the amount of magical power he could hold inside. Then the man thanked Lady for cracking the truth behind the weapon's failure, and after that deep, heartfelt talk, Izo dove right back into fixing it, like it had been ages. The man was still grinding away at that sword, racing the clock. He had only 2 weeks left before the deadline, so he threw everything he had into it. The girls watched his every move like it mattered, while ISO used his abilities during the repair to pull off the best possible result. After what felt like forever, the mithril sword finally came out complete, and the exhausted man gazed at it with a satisfied smile, because everyone was thrilled that the weapon repair had succeeded. Then Izo shouted at Liddy, thrusting a sword into her hands so she could inspect it. Liddy the elf edged closer, nerves rattling as she stared at the blade. She fixed her eyes on the weapon Ace had just repaired, while the other girl kept glaring at the elf, begging for any reaction. Then, like a switch flipped, Lady broke into a bright smile and practically glowed with how thrilled she was with Iso's work. The blonde girl thanked everyone, and Izo forged the sword so much sharper than she ever asked for, that the trio erupted in pure joy as they finally nailed the elf's request, leaving even that man staring in shock like, I did better than I had to. What? Isa frowned. He swore he'd pushed it too far trying to restore that sword, and then the black-haired man, already plotting a full remake. Liddy caught the blacksmith's worry and flashed him a sweet, calm smile, then told Tom that the sword he'd just restored would blaze with even more magic than the original, and honestly, the man had helped her every step of the way. Iso let out a shaky sigh of relief. Thank goodness the girl loved everything. Then Lady snapped the conversation to payments, and suddenly it was her turn to fret, wondering if that price even matched what Iso could do. Iso didn't see it that way at all. Then Liddy flashed a warm smile, totally at ease with how simple this guy was. Next, she stretched her palms out wide and spilled what she had. The elf tried to pay the blacksmith with 5 gold coins and a chunk of wood. Liddy was totally baffled, because Iso had done way more than she ever expected, and she'd wanted to hand him more, but that was all she had left at that moment. Isa fumbled through the numbers, trying to figure out the price, while the girl hauled every required material in on her own. Then a spark hit him. He shoved the gold coin back into her hand, and the lady accepted it with a confused, wide-eyed stare. Iso also handed the elf a mission: bring him vegetable seeds from her village for that gold coin. If she doesn't find it too much, then once the seeds are in her hands, she'll be forced to deliver them to Camillo. Lady nearly choked on the man's audacious request, yet less than half a gold coin was more than enough to cover the seats. Still, he didn't send her back, saying that coin was the tuition fee for him and Rika. The blonde elf stared at Iso like he'd lit up the world. She bowed hard and thanked him for every kind word, and he just shot back a warm, steady smile. Next, Liddy was about to leave their house, and a whole group of girls, plus Asa, rushed together to send her off. The elf, clutching her sword bundle in her hands, thanked everyone too, and she couldn't believe it. Blacksmithing had been way more interesting than she ever imagined, and she was genuinely grateful for the whole experience. She beamed that she'd had a blast spending time with him, and the girls lit up right back, smiling so wide you could feel their relief, because the guest was finally satisfied. Then a bunch of girls marched up to Liddy to say their goodbyes, and they squeezed one last promise out of her. She'd teach them swordsmanship and elf magic too. The girl caught every word and suddenly realized she didn't have to come here on an order alone. Aizo nodded in agreement, then beamed at her and waved her off, insisting she go tell everyone how legendary their forge really was. After they handed the elven rapier back to Aizo's forge, the whole crew slipped back into their usual calm, until Aizo's found himself right back in Camillo's lava. After that, the shop owner swore the man had zero problems. As Azo rolled into the city, whispers about deadly thieves slammed into his ears, so he pushed Camillo to spill every detail. Turns out the thief smashed into someone's house, but when the dust settled, the victims only had a few bruises, and the mystery attacker didn't steal a thing. Yet he still vanished without getting caught, leaving everyone unable to remember his voice or his face. Azo heard this and froze. Something felt wildly off about the whole thing. Diana first pointed the finger at Carol, but the way it all played out didn't match her at all. If Carol already had people this experienced, he should have snapped them up way earlier. Iaso nodded along to the girl's words, and Camillo backed it up too. Even though Azo's house is still standing, no damage yet, the girls vow to tread carefully, sitting in the office and sipping tea in silence, until Camillo suddenly snaps his fingers and remembers something. The shopkeeper leaned in and told Azo he'd got a creature shaped like a horse, and the second horse hit his ears. Azo's mind instantly flashed with the memory of an animal. They were begging for an extra horse because a brutal stretch of heavy hauling was about to hit, and then Camillo stepped in and showed the company the way to the true essence. Iso and the three girls stopped cold in pure shock when they laid eyes on the creature Camillo had been talking about, because if everyone else hadn't already been stunned, Iso definitely would have been. The thing Camillo showed them wasn't just any horse, it was something totally, terrifyingly different. The creature let out a cute little purr the second it spotted them, and Camillo quickly blurted out that it wasn't a real horse at all, because right in front of them, a running dragon actually burst into view. Sure, it wasn't even a real dragon, it was a lizard from the Dragon Club, and it was sprinting like it had somewhere important to be. Eyes wide, Diana and him couldn't stop staring at that adorable little blur as it sped by. The running dragon snapped its head around, all curious-like, and Diana's heart melted even harder at that sweet little move. She blushed so hard, she started smacking the man's shoulder in pure embarrassment, and Iso instantly knew the girl was totally into the dragon. Diana was still playfully pounding his shoulder when he grilled Camillo about what a running dragon eats, and the shopkeeper leaned in and said it'll chow down on basically everything. Veggies, meat, cereals, even grass, zero picky attitude. Iso heard that and instantly got the whole picture. At home, he had zero trouble with meat or grass. Then the man fired back, asking how many times the running dragon had eaten, and Camillo answered flat out, they hadn't eaten much. Even that running dragon barely even nibbled him. So Diana just stared with starry-eyed admiration, and Iso scrambled to figure out why that man refused to keep the dragon around. Then Camillo leaned in and told Ezo that a running dragon would steal the spotlight in his stable, weigh too much against the horses, and Ezo got it instantly. He snapped his focus back to the dragon, while Diana held her breath, praying the man's decision wouldn't crush her. Iso saw it and nodded, agreeing to take the beast. Camillo's smile lit up his face, and the shop owner added that the running dragon would cost a fortune. But the dark-haired man didn't even flinch. He promised he'd pay for the running dragon next time, and Camillo didn't care at all. Then he went straight to work prepping the bridal party and everything else. Next, the man ditched the company and sprinted off to fetch what the running dragon needed, humming a soft tune as it spilled from his mouth, and Iso watched with a grin. Diana was already itching to stroke that dragon, while the blacksmith didn't even bat an eye, because pretty soon he'd be part of their family too. The blonde girl leaned in and tenderly traced the skin of the running dragon, and the beast didn't so much as flinch. The girl pressed her entire palm against the dragon, and the moment she felt his warm, living body beneath it, her eyes lit up in pure awe. Diana was absolutely thrilled. At the same moment, the running dragon finally relaxed. He lowered his guard and let the girl reach down to the base of his head. Then Milo's running dragon rumbled a happy purr, and the moment his voice lit up, the new member of their family instantly felt right at home. Diana's cheeks flared again as he made that move, and the other girls couldn't resist either. They marched up, lined in, and slowly stroked that adorable running dragon, and just like that, they gained a new sweet, dependable family member. After a while, a bunch of people piled into a wooden cart loaded with supplies, while their running dragon tore across the land pulling it, and Rick sat up front, leaning in as he steered the beast. Iso grilled Rick about that running dragon, the same one who somehow already knew exactly how to tug a cart. And yeah, their newest family member zipped along fast, but once again, the cart barely rocked at all. That running dragon looked totally at ease, yanking the cart onto himself like it was nothing. Aizo loved that too. When he got back, he even cranked up training for their new pet. Then bam, the cart hit a stone and flipped right up into the air, and everyone immediately swayed. Izo told them they had to train their new family member fast, because on the road he kept jerking ahead like he couldn't control his own speed. Diana clocked that the man was still measuring this trip against the time he had to duck and hide in Camilo's carriage, while Celia fretted that the wagon might not hold heavier loads, so they'd have to crank up the load capacity. Soon they plunged into the forest, moving so fast the trip took only half the time it would have taken to walk all the way home, and that wind lit a spark of happiness in them. That dragon runs like a missile never once got tired, not even for a second, and Iso felt his nerves melt into calm the moment they hit the forest. But the man kept his eyes razor-sharp, still on full guard over their new pet. Out of nowhere, the cart smashed onto a thick branch in mid-ride, and the running dragon didn't even slow down, so the carriage jolted skyward with every passenger on board for a split second. Then everyone crashed right back into it, and Reich shot them an apologetic look. She swore they'd only gotten caught by a thick branch. No one got hurt, but Izo couldn't shake the discomfort, so he pushed to upgrade the wagon's suspension right away, while the running dragon just snarled and growled at them. After a while they finally stumbled back home, and everyone swore it felt faster than before, like the road itself was shortening, because the sun was still blazing high in the sky. Everyone was grinning because the trip back took way less time, so they suddenly had extra hours to do whatever they wanted. The dark-haired man hurried over with a bucket of water, so the running dragon could wipe off after the ride, and Iso thanked the pet for getting them there. Then the man grabbed a cloth and started wiping the running dragon's body clean, like a grim ritual. Then he hurried off to bring meat to Tom. Meanwhile, the running dragon basked in Iso's courtship and pushed its muzzle against the man. Ursu knew that even a running dragon might munch grass, but it didn't stop him from thinking about spoiling it. Then Diana showed up fast, clutching a tray of meat, and the blonde girl immediately wanted to name their new pet. Reich tried to figure out the gender of the running dragons first, but they had no clue how to tell those dragons apart by gender, so they dropped it and just left it hanging, while Isa couldn't wait to hear what everyone else thought about the name. Diana blurted out that she'd overheard some aristocrat name his horse, right as she was driving into the third, so everyone went wild, laughing that the name was so wild you couldn't even remember it the first time. Then Diana pressed Izo for his idea, but he refused to even try naming the running dragon, because every name he came up with would be a total nightmare to say. Right there, Celia hit on it. She noticed the running dragon purred nonstop during the meeting, and the girl from the animal race blurted, "Let's call him Urchik." Everyone lit up when Celia pitched her idea. She came up with an adorable name that fit their new family member perfectly. Iso latched onto Sally's idea, and this new name was so easy to remember. From that moment, the running dragon became Urchik. Diana beamed at him, congratulating his new name, and the moment they said it, the running dragon purred like it totally understood. After they picked the name for their running dragon, everyone finally peeled away to rest and get back to life, while Iso was already plotting to give their new pet a tiny house the very next day. The next day rolled in and Iso yawned his way outside, ready to grab water, only he hauled those collection jars with him. Then his eyes snagged on something that instantly stole his focus. The man spotted a dragon that had been sprinting, now sprawled right in front of him, eyes locked on Iso. Then Iso stepped up, said hello, and asked if he wanted to come with him to fetch water. The running dragon rumbled in agreement, and the man froze in shock, then sprinted back into the house to grab a bucket for it. Ursu fastened a bucket to a rope and swung it over the running dragon's neck, and somehow the rope never choked him. It let the dragon carry that bucket comfortably as he tore forward. The dark-haired man scratched his pet with pure affection, the very one that leaned in for more. Then, side by side, they made a beeline for the river. And yeah, Urchik wasn't just strong, he was a relentless, hard-working dragon through and through. He figured out he could trust the Urchik, so the water run went flawlessly, and for a running dragon, every single warm-up step mattered. Today, everyone was busy building a home for the Urchik, and good news, they'd stacked up plenty of wood. All that was left was to haul the logs into place. But now they had an earth chick in their corner, so hauling wood stopped being a nightmare, and that running dragon kept them moving every step of the way. Diana fretted over that runaway dragon, thinking Tom couldn't possibly carry all that wood. She stared at Urchik with a mix of dread and thrill, while everyone else stayed cool and unshaken. Urchik didn't just haul the wood, he helped them yank down the branches too, and with his help the house practically flew together. The new home for the running dragon was finished in just 2 days. Everyone cheered because they finally built a real home for their pet, so I trotted over to the running dragon and told him that, from that day on, he'd live in the cabin, and Urchik tiptoed inside to carefully inspect every corner of his new house. Now he could dodge the rain and finally sleep somewhere safe, and the blonde girl went, "Yes, this is awesome," because her own house meant freedom, and even running Dragon nodded in full agreement. Urchik happily sprawled out on the soft hay couch, and Diana's heart melted at how relaxed he looked. Then she immediately started petting him with pure excitement, while everyone else just watched in awe. I couldn't stop admiring how that running dragon read the world. He was sharp enough to understand every one of their moves, and Izo felt the exact same way. The man burst with relief that they managed to fit Urchik in so fast. Salia praised Izo for his brutal hard work, and Izo clearly didn't hold back, while the girl watched him with cool admiration because the guy knew everything, and then the man suddenly froze the moment their words hit him. He still carries the memories of his past life, so he pulls out techniques and tech this world hasn't even seen yet, and with that edge, he keeps outshining most people at his job. He also realized he couldn't break the rules of this world, so Iso had to take his best inventions from his own world and adapt them here. After a while, they rushed back to the river for water, and the man headed there again with the boy as the running dragon helped him haul it up. Then, just like the plan said, Iso pushed for an upgrade to the wagon. But it had to be done to keep not just his family safe, but his own lower back too. Then the man barked, "Everyone focus on fixing the wagon for now," and promised that once it's done, they'd all go right back to their regular work. The guy told Rika she'd have to work with metal too, and she didn't even blink, yet Iso still drowned in guilt, because in the end he believed it would all be worth it for him to handle. The dwarf tried to steady the furious man, begging him to trust her, because Rick needed to at least do his duty as a student, and Iso ended up thanking the girl for all her support. Next, he jumped in with everyone to overhaul the carriage, because if he wants the trip to stay smooth, he's gotta build a suspension that stops all that brutal shaking. With Izo's resources at hand, he could have pulled it off, so he boiled the water, tossed the material in, and used the heat to make it bend. Then he slammed the different bars together and nailed them tight. Then Iso snapped the front and rear wheels into place, slapped springs onto the back wheels, and built a prototype trolley with wooden wheels. Right after he finished the prototype, Iso finally let out a relieved breath, and just then Urchik rolled up, ready to put the wagon's prototype to the test, because the running dragon couldn't wait to see how it performed. The man gladly let him take over, so Iso snapped a bridle onto the urchin and started studying the cart because this experiment was simple. He set a bucket of water on it, rolled it forward, and when the urchin finally moved, the bucket stayed steady and the water didn't spill somehow. With Urchiks driving them, they snagged the best prototype off the trolleys. Then it was all about getting every detail right and shaping the suspension perfectly. Even with Iso's past world knowledge in his head, they still had to grind like crazy. Sweat poured off his face as he fought to keep up. He finally caught his breath, staring at everything like, people really are incredible, because they built these things from the ground up, no shortcut, no previous life knowledge, just raw invention. People have always fought to make life less painful, because in this world that's just how it goes, until Izo got pulled into it. The steel he grabbed was just as solid as the Iso uses to finish the order, because blacksmithing isn't just making stuff, it's hardcore, almost jewelry precise, and you often have to hunt the answer through trial and error, even for tiny problems that look harmless. The man was busy building that wagon, and at one point he was already snapping the boards onto the base like clockwork, while Urchik kept his eyes locked on him, and Izo's power made the whole job way easier. After decades of grind, or even 20 years, people finally pull off results like that, but Iso still feared he couldn't call his power truly his. But the thought hit like a brick wall and he just couldn't handle it anymore, so he stopped thinking, and then out of nowhere someone called his name. Celia tugged the man into lunch, right-cooked food waiting just for them, and the second he heard the plan, he snapped his work on the cart to stop. Then with the girls right beside him, he dug into a quick snack, and at lunch, Iso kicked off a message to everyone. He promised he'd be done fine-tuning the wagon in a couple days and be back to normal work right after. He didn't forget to thank Reich for taking orders for him. Then the guy thanked everyone else too for helping him around the house. Reich soaked up the praise with a smile, and she said she finally had time to practice her magic management. The girls soaked up the magic like it was pure joy, and Iso was relieved she never got worn out from her work. Then Celia caught Reich crafting jaw-dropping knives non-stop, and Diana nodded along, fully agreeing. Reich swallowed her embarrassment as her words landed, cheeks burning bright. Then she thanked the girls with flushed, bashful pride, and the man couldn't miss it. The girl was absolutely glowing from that compliment. Then he and Reich burst into the forge, and the man went straight to work, scrutinizing the knives the girl had crafted. With his ability, Iso poured over Reich's creation, but the blades still felt strangely familiar, like he'd seen this level of craft before. Still, there was no denying it. This time, the skill had jumped to a whole new level. The man praised his student's work and told her it was flawless, but Reich didn't buy it for a second, and the girl knew she still had a mountain of lessons to climb. Reich craved the perfect weapon model, and Izo locked eyes with the smiling girl, then fired off words that promised she'd succeed, and Reich practically burst with joy while the girl lit up with pure, overwhelming happiness. The perfect moment finally hit, so the upgraded wagon was ready at last, and Iso brought the girl over, waving her in and inviting her to ride in the carriage. Meanwhile, the urchik was already locked and waiting. The girls hurried up to the carriage and stared, because it didn't just look gorgeous, the seats felt amazing too, and Reich immediately clocked that Izo had even carved out a separate spot for the coachman. Once everyone dropped into their seats, the man lunged into the driver's seat and barked an order, "Erichik, go." The running dragon snapped to it and tore down the road, while the cart rolled along smooth and calm beside it. Reich, Celia, and Diana expected trouble, but they ended up feeling totally at ease with the man. The carriage hardly jolted at all, and it didn't hurt them one bit to sit the way they always had, like this was finally the comfort they'd been craving. Then the dark-haired man leaned in and told them he'd strapped springs onto the wagon wheels, so it barely jolts like it's gliding on rails, and that means the company won't sweat over luggage anymore. They can haul ass, and the girls are left absolutely stunned by ISO's genius. For a full minute they rattled along in silence on the cart, everyone soaking up the ride, finally relaxed, because there was no longer any fear of getting tossed off. Diana looked totally at ease as a cool breeze danced over their faces, and the running dragon, purring like a dream, glided calmly down the exact path they were meant to take. And once transport gets faster, even by itself it means they can haul way more goods, so news spreads in a blink. Etso knew this wouldn't just change their lives, it would shake everything. As soon as Isaiah stepped into this world, they warned him his existence wouldn't shake a thing, but now he's watching his own knowledge reshape him with every breath, because one careless step aside can flip everything in an instant. As the man weighed what his life meant for this world, Celia turned and praised Urchik, calling him a good boy, and Urchik, soaking it in, happily purred as their journey kept rolling forward, chasing a brand new tomorrow. While he talked with Camillo, the man kept double-checking the money he'd gotten, and Azo's cheeks burned with embarrassment, because the shopkeeper had sold him a running dragon for way below the market price. Still, he wasn't about to complain. Camillo leaned in and told Aso the truth. An Empire noble had hit rock bottom and was broke, so the noble started dumping the running dragon for cheap, and Camillo snagged it and resold it to Aso for just a bit more, pocketing the profit. Azo clocked that Camillo wasn't rambling. He was talking about the Empire, their neighboring country. Then the man eyed the running dragon and called it smart, strong, and exactly the kind of helper they needed, since this trick lets the company reach the city way faster than usual. Camilla breathed in relief, then the shopkeeper cut in, steering the conversation to something else entirely. He demanded answers from Izo about the upgraded version of the wagon Izo had just built. Enzo clocked it instantly, the pendant he'd already seen, no question. Now it was time to lay out what the card really did, while the girls kicked back and happily sipped their tea. After that explanation, the stunned Camillo finally got it. Because of the suspension, the cart stopped rattling so hard, and the goods could roll out faster than ever. But sure, the suspension could only take so much, so there was no point stuffing the cart beyond its limits. Camilla leaned in as the man explained, and right then, Izo told Tom he could build yet another one just like it. Camillo just froze when those words hit him, mouth hanging open in shock. Then the man snapped back to his senses and demanded what Iso had said, all fired up, only for Iso to tell him he might not even have to pay for the cart. Camillo tried to rein in his rage because the shopkeeper's conscience wouldn't let him take that cart for free, so he stormed out of the office and yelled down the hallway for help, while Azo just sat there, calm as ever, waiting for Camillo. While Camillo was gone, Celia clocked a surge of new faces flooding the city, and Esau immediately knew exactly why. Camillo told me Marius has been grinding non-stop to build this city lately, while Tom keeps getting dragged into battles with demons on the border, over and over. And lately bandits have been swarming the roads. ISO even heard rumors they're still slipping away, uncaught. After swapping words with Camillo, the company hustled off to the market to grab groceries. Then they tore back onto the road toward home, riding in eerie quiet. Reich was just relieved they'd de-wrapped things up in the city while the sun was still blazing, when suddenly everyone's senses snapped and an unknown stranger appeared on their horizon. A girl in a raincoat yanked her hood low, hid her face, and slammed their carriage to a halt, then warned them, "If you don't stop, something terrible is coming for you." Iso could only shout for Erichik to freeze, because the bandit from the rumors had suddenly shown up right in front of them, and the hooded woman they didn't recognize was gripping a weapon, barking at them to stay perfectly still and not make a single sudden move. He leaned in and hissed to his crew, telling them not to ease up. Then he snapped his gaze around the nearest street, barely daring to turn his head too far, only to find no backup anywhere, though you couldn't deny the terrifying chance those were the same bandits everyone in the city had been whispering about. Diana couldn't believe this bandit was still out there, and Iso felt the exact same way, because the crew had no clue what that guy who just stopped them was even trying to pull off. With a lightning snap, an unknown bandit swung his blade and thrust its sharp edge at the running dragon, and the dragon just stared back, completely baffled. Diana shot up from her seat, furious to yank her sword from its scabbard, but a scream from her companions snapped her back. Then the bandit, seeing the hesitation, barked for everyone to drop their weapons. Everyone snapped tense on the spot, Diana's still fuming over that bandit's stunt. Then the man fired his ability, his eyes flaring as he read the enemy's raw power, stronger than Diana but still short of Helen. And with Sadia standing right there, the fight finally tipped their way. Suddenly Right brushed the man's shoulder, snapping his focus onto her, and the girl yelled for him to hurl her knife at the bandit. Aizu just nodded and took the assignment without digging for answers, and before she could even blink, the man hurled a gun at the bandit's feet. Aizu snatched it up in silence, but when she felt what was inside the weapon, it hit her like lightning. The man froze tight, nerves screaming as he waited to see what she'd do next. The girl stepped into view, bared her face, and demanded where they'd snatched that weapon from. Then a bold pattern stared back from her skin. 1 second after the bandits asked their question, the whole group froze. Sure, they were roaring with laughter inside, but nobody could quite let it out. The bandits stared at them, confused and hung on every word. She wouldn't stop badgering them about guns. Then Isaac snapped back that he hadn't taken it anywhere, because he's the one who made it, and the bandit went completely speechless. Isaac kept talking as they headed for their home. Then he warned her, "If you're really curious about our product, put the sword away." The mysterious woman listened on the spot and stowed her weapon. Then the man waved the girl into their carriage, and the bandit froze at the sheer shock of it all, until the man couldn't spare her much time. After a heartbeat of silence, the girl finally slipped into the cart, saying she was hunting a weapon with that exact emblem. And right then the girls realized what Iso had been bragging about all along. He made these weapons himself. Then the bandit demanded he forge her a weapon, and Iso didn't think the girl was all that bad, but the other people's suspicious looks made him stall, until he finally let out a heavy, defeated sigh. He promised he'd do it on one wild condition: the girl must show up alone at his forge in the Black Forest, and he even spelled out the route to her. Then he shrugged, saying the bandit only needed to be there the next day.